The Majority Report with Sam Seder, where every day's Casual Friday. That means Monday is Casual Monday, Tuesday, Casual Tuesday, Wednesday, Casual Hump Day, Thursday, Casual Thurs, that's what we call it, and Friday, Casual Shabbat. The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
It is Friday, October 26, 2018. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. It's Casual Friday, folks. Joining us to look back on the week that was and still is Ben Dixon from the Benjamin Dixon Show. Also on the program, comedian Ted Alexandro. New special out. Check it out at tedalexandro.com. Maybe we'll talk to him about that. Also on the program, up to 12 bombs and counting sent to demonized non-Republican figures. A suspect is now in custody. A Florida man who, like most false flaggers, came from a van full of pro-Trump posters. Very suspicious. Meanwhile, Trump considers sending troops to the border to guard against wayward, piggybacking parents. And also in Florida, Democratic governor candidate Andrew Gillum may win Ben Nelson's Senate seat for him. Meanwhile, the Saudis now admit that the Khashoggi killing was premeditated. Slight reversal from when they said he left the embassy. And finally, regulatory relief for abusive payday lenders. Care of Mick Mulvaney's Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And the Megyn Kelly $69 million experiment has ended. New York State sues Exxon for misleading investors on climate change. And Trump proposes a Rube Goldberg mechanism to achieve the Democratic plan to lower drug costs. And also, he's lying. Meanwhile, Democrats ignoring Trump in campaigns at record levels, while Republicans focus on brown people. And lastly, Brazilian elections this Sunday. The fascist Bolsonaro up by 10%. If you are listening from Brazil, please vote. Otherwise,
good luck.
Keep your fingers crossed. All this and more, ladies and gentlemen, on Casual Friday. Yes, it is the famous Casual Friday here at the Majority Report. Just one more note on Brazil. Apparently, Lula says, ask Brazil not to go on a fascist adventure. But, we know how alluring that can be.
Super alluring. Also, Noam Chomsky pointed out that Bolsonaro's plans for the Amazon rainforest alone could also be another nail in the coffin of global climate because of the Amazon's distinct role in regulating the global environment.
That would be voting out of fear.
I wish I could do a Brazilian accent for like Lula was corrupt. I'm not going to vote out of fear.
That's what they'd be voting out of fear.
Yeah. If you get rid of the
Portuguese
Amazon.
accent's very tricky.
Yeah, I can't do that one. I like the one with Lenin, which was somebody said, so I say He took money from the Germans. I say we get rid of Lenin. We give the power back to the Tsar. We wait for a real revolutionary to come over. Said Jimmy Dore's grandfather.
All right, come on. I don't know why we're getting it so early in the program. Folks,
what are you going to do?
one of today's sponsors is newsvoice.com/majority. You're aware of just how hermetically sealed many of us are, the left and the right. The right, of course, are hermetically sealed in a world of news that is, in many times, incredibly fabricated. In fact, most of the show today is about the idea of these two different narratives that seem to exist in the country, and they're competing for each other in terms of electoral. One is we need better health care. The other is that there are throngs of
invaders
of families who, instead of going to a family picnic, are going to invade the country and beat us up with pacifiers and stuffies.
Which is not good for pre-existing conditions, and the
Right.
Democrats want that.
Right, exactly.
The Democrats want that.
There's a new media company that has come up with their own response, at least to these problems of the hermetically sealed news bubbles that people are in. Not so much the other problems, but maybe one will help the other. It's called News Voice. It's an app for iOS and Android. It gives you access for free. I'm sorry, you can get access for free for this app if you go to newsvoice.com/majority. It gives you a personalized news feed by aggregating a mix of mainstream media sources, international sources, and independent media sources. Multiple sources are provided for each news story. So, in my mind, that's the best thing about this service, is that if you want to have arguments with people about stuff, it's very important to know what their sort of starting point, their basic assumptions are. The entire app is fueled by crowdsourcing. You can upvote stories you think are important so more people will see them. You can add stories to the app. You can add a source that's missing to the story. It's meant to be completely open and a democratized news aggregator. Like I say, lets you get every side of every story. They also have video interviews series featuring guests from Chris Hedges to Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez. Go download the app for free at newsvoice.com/majority. If you are listening to this program, we have it in the podcast description. If you're watching this program, it's in our YouTube description. Check it out, newsvoice.com/majority. All right, so today we're going to be talking about this with Ben Dixon. Broadly speaking, we are now 10 days out from the election. I can't do the math. A week from Tuesday, and obviously, super important to get out there to tell people to vote. My basic assumption is that 99.9% of you who are listening to the sound of my voice are planning to vote. So I'm not going to waste my time imploring you to vote. I am going to waste my time imploring you to get other people to vote. Find, by any means necessary, those people who you think are not voting and have them vote. Super, super important. Even if you think you're in a safe district, the sheer numbers will help the narrative, and that's also important. That's what a big part of politics is. And it's, you go out there and you vote, you get people involved. Who knows where it goes from there? So go out, meet some people, talk to some people. Maybe you will create relationships that will be helpful 2 weeks from now when you start agitating for the winners of these elections to do what you want them to do, which is ultimately just as, if not more important. Well, probably more important, but obviously one is subsidiary to the other. They have to be in office for you to be able to agitate to them to get them to do what you want. So here is Donald Trump. He is in Wisconsin. Wisconsin reportedly has purged their rolls of hundreds of thousands of voters. Certainly know in the run-up to the 2016 election, they had practiced a finely tuned form of voter suppression. They have a strict voter ID, which targets African Americans and students, at least at the top of the list. Donald Trump is there campaigning for Scott Walker, who is in big trouble. He predicted at the beginning of this year he would be in big trouble. Hopefully he loses badly. But Donald Trump here lays out what Republicans, and we're going to play other clips from people who are pundits to people who are candidates. And Donald Trump here is just laying the groundwork. You will hear this is obviously the message that Republicans are running on, which is be afraid of brown people and let me come up with multiple different ways of trying to express it. So if you're not afraid of brown people because of this small anecdote, you're going to be afraid of brown people for that anecdote. And then, of course, Trump adds his own sort of, I want to say hyperbole, but it's really just complete lying in presenting this case.
It's tough stuff. And, you know, where I grew up, near Long Island, we have, like, these great communities, and they were infiltrated with MS-13. And we got them. He says, get them the hell out. We are, actually. We actually are. We are getting them out of this country by the thousands, if you can believe it. But, you know, it's like liberating, like a war, like there's a foreign invasion, and they occupy your country, and then you get them out through whatever, and they call it liberation. You're liberated. ICE goes in, and they're much tougher, much stronger, and much smarter. They go in, and they, in a relatively nice way, I want to say that, relatively nice, they get them out. They put them in the paddy wagons, and they get them out of the country. They bring them back home. Or worse.
Pause it. Or worse. Or worse. The percentage of members of MS-13 that ICE has arrested in the 2 years of the Trump administration, we don't know exactly because I don't know if they released these type of data. But it can't be anything just by sheer numbers unless there were hundreds of thousands of members of MS-13 in this country. It can't be more than a couple of percentage points. ICE is far more adept under the Trump administration of rounding up and deporting moms and dads of middle-class families, people who've been here for an extended period of time. I mean, this is all obviously a lie, but that is just, you got to start, like, you know, you got to think about this as like steps, right? You can't get to the top step in terms of like incredible lies unless you go through these subsidiary steps. And now he's taking us to stuff that, like, honestly, the idea that grown people, I understand motivated reasoning, but the idea that grown people don't get up and walk out and go like, this is just too much. What if somebody sees me here at this point after this lie is blows my mind.
Or worse. And these towns are being liberated, and the people are clapping. They're looking. I'm telling you, it's like watching World War II movies. It's like watching documentaries on World War I and World War II, the occupations. They get them, they take them out, and the people are on their windows. They're clapping and screaming, and they're happy. This is ICE. And the Democrats want to terminate ICE. They want to get rid of them.
Pause it. Is there anybody in the audience who's just going like, well, maybe he's exaggerating a little. Maybe there aren't people.
Wouldn't we be the people that would have seen that footage?
But you know what I think partially what's going on, though, and this doesn't in any way undermine your point, is the I forget who first came up with the phrase, but taking Trump seriously but not literally. And I think there's a lot of like, for all intents and purposes, if you're this xenophobic and bigoted in your voting, it might as well be, right? Like MS-13 is the same thing.
Well, of course they can't do that in their windows because there's too much PC-ness. But inside, they close the drapes and then they're cheering out their windows.
So I think he's actually, so it's a funny way, I think he's actually saying, like, they're basically saying, like, it's all the same to me, and here's like a touch of ridiculous nonsense conspiracy
You know,
theories.
it's the exact same sort of lie, but just flipped, as he said when he said Muslims were celebrating 9/11.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's exactly
Inside they were. Inside
it.
themselves.
Literally, I think that's exactly what's going on.
Nice. They want to get rid of them. So if you want to uphold our laws, our borders, and our way of life, you need to vote for Scott Walker and Leah Vukmar. Leah Vukmar.
Jesus.
He's so funny.
I'm so impressed that I got her name right. Vukmar. That is, you know why he said that, right? Because phonetically, that's the way it's spelled out on his teleprompter.
Vitmar. How is he
Just
not
crazy.
like? How is he not like a professional Liberace impersonator?
It's crazy.
Like, how is this not like?
He kind of is.
He is basically a I'm a really racist professional Liberace impersonator.
With the maturity of a teenager.
Less than.
All right, folks, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, Ben Dixon from The Benjamin Dixon Show. We are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report on the phone. It is a pleasure to welcome back to the program the proprietor and host of the Benjamin Dixon Show, available on iTunes and Stitcher and at the BenjaminDixonShow.com. Benjamin Dixon. Hello, Ben. How
Sam.
are you?
I'm doing great, Sam. Always a pleasure to be here with you all. How's it going over there?
It's going
Up there,
great.
rather.
Thank you so much for joining us. Let's just briefly talk about this. I mean, it's sort of, I don't know, maybe on some level, I feel like I'm not doing my job as a polemicist and as a sort of, propagandist in the most sort of value neutral expression. But there have been 12 bombs now sent to Democratic leaders and one guy associated with and a couple of like administrative people like Brennan and Holder, and I don't know why these bombs didn't go off. I'm not a bomb maker or a bomb diffuser, but they could have, and maybe those people wouldn't have been killed, but it would have been other, people. But the idea of like bombs being sent to the top leadership of the opposition party seems a little problematic, and you would imagine that like everything would stop, right? Yeah. And they have found the guy. Here's a picture of his van. It is adorned with pictures of Pence and Trump, and pictures of like Michael Moore with a target on it, Hillary Clinton with a target on it, Jill Stein with a target on it, others. And I mean, and now I don't know, maybe it's all false flag. Maybe when they get in there, it's going to be, I don't know, Tom Perez is going to be, that's his van, and whatever, but highly unlikely. Just give me your sense of how underplayed this is. And like the idea that Donald Trump, you would think that Donald Trump would like call the former president and say, hey, just want you to know we're doing everything we can to protect you.
Yeah. That's one of the most notable things outside of the insanity of bombs being sent itself. I feel like I gave the same disclaimer on my podcast this morning. Like I mentioned it, but I didn't want to stay there because there's just too many variables there that we don't know, except for the ridiculousness that we're getting from Donald Trump and the conservatives. This perfectly sealed hermetic bubble that they exist in, they have accepted in their minds. Even the president, he's floating this idea that it's a false flag. That's clearly a possibility, but to have that spread by the president before the FBI can actually resolve that is the case, just shows you just how ridiculous, how far gone we are, to the point where that behavior by Trump is the exact same thing that drives our news cycle, that is just constantly, day after day. We can't even keep up with it. So now that 12 bombs have been sent, or packages that are suspected of being bombs or whatever they are, it's nothing shut down. Nobody's moving any slower. The news is still going just as fast as ever.
But let's talk about this notion of people floating that it's a false flag, right? Like I think I saw that guy, Brett Weinstein, making some argument about like, it would be irresponsible, like, because it's a possibility, the idea of raising this question shouldn't be criticized in some way.
Right.
And I do not remember a single instance when any of these people, when anybody ever said it was a false, like hypothesized that it could be a false flag when we had any other type of like the Times Square bombing or any of this other stuff. Because let's be honest here. It is a possibility that it's a false flag in the same way that it's a possibility that it's a false flag of a false flag of a false flag of a false flag of a false flag.
Exactly.
Like the idea that someone's going to send out 12 bombs and it's some type of Democratic operative, okay?
Right.
And they're going to send this out and not get caught, right? Like they're so good at this that they can send out 12 bomb packages and not get caught, is highly, highly unlikely, it seems to me. Like beyond unlikely. It is almost to the level of absurdness. Now, it's possible.
Yeah.
You could have a crazy person who sends this, who is like, I'm supportive of all these people, and therefore I'm sending it, and I won't get caught, and they're completely crazy. But it's not really a false flag as much as it's a crazy person who has been driven to do something crazy. And, no doubt this guy has some mental issues if it's a guy who sent these out. But this is like, there are certain, the idea of entertaining this as a false flag, like it's an operation, right? Like there's
Right.
some is just absurd, and it is. I don't know. To me, that's just it's absurd.
It's to be expected from certain circles like Dinesh D'Souza. This is right par and course. This is how he makes his money, right? To have it coming from the White House. I don't care if Donald Trump is the president. I don't care how ridiculous Donald Trump is. To have that coming from the White House absolutely undermines the entire process, right? And I'm not surprised that Donald Trump is doing this, but we still can't let that be an excuse for how absurd this is. At some point, we have to grab hold of one of these news cycles and not just be flung around with the madness all day and cling on to the fact that this is happening right before our eyes, and it's being spearheaded by the president of the United States. I think one of the reasons we can't make anything stick to Donald Trump is because we're spinning so fast, and he knows that, and he's contributing to that. And I think that's why he floated the false flag notion this morning. And I don't know if it was this morning or last night, but when he floated it, he knows what he's contributing to. He's contributing to the chaos.
Let's listen to this clip from, what's her name? Trish Regan. She is on Fox Business, and she has an interesting take as to what caused this this situation with these bombs, but also sort of like, there's a chyron underneath that the breaking news U.S. troops are deploying to the border because, Ben, as you know, and I'm sure you know, you are, I believe, down in the Atlanta area, so you are south of us. And I imagine this makes this that much more harrowing for you. But approximately 2,000 miles from you, there are almost 2,500 families with children who
Terrifying.
who are obviously looking to take over your home. So, but let's listen to Trish Regan break this down for us.
Night. Plus, new tonight, a nationwide manhunt underway for the suspected mail bomber. We have fresh intel that Florida, Maryland, and New York are key areas of interest. Meanwhile, the media is ratcheting up its attacks on the president, saying these heinous acts are all his fault. The media refusing to take any responsibility for themselves. It's the victim mentality all over again. Geraldo is here, and he is my guest on that.
Geraldo.
Right. Yeah, well, which part of that is the most absurd? The idea that
the Geraldo part, hands down, like he's going to be the expert on this issue. But no, seriously, the entire framing is asinine, Sam. I don't even know what you want to say about that.
Well, I mean, CNN's taking a victim mentality probably because they had 2 bombs sent to them.
I mean, there's that. There's that. Here's the bigger problem that you speak to all the time, and I always like to cast it in this framing, right? This is strategic. This is not an oversight. This is part of the programming. It's not a bug. It's a feature. They know what they're doing. It's the victimizers playing the role of the victim. It's calling the real victims people who are having the victim complex. It's the oppressor trying to maintain power by feigning as though they are the oppressed. And anytime they can find a scapegoat that they can fulfill that victim complex that they are projecting onto us through, right now it's the migrants that are coming north. They execute it flawlessly, and they do so. Here's the biggest problem: they do so through this massive propaganda machine that is funded by billionaires that we don't have anything remotely close to on the left. And that combination makes them successful over and over again. We felt like we had one step forward, I guess, with Obama, but now it really feels like we've taken 10 steps back. That's because we never really took a step forward. We just kind of had an anomaly. But this conservative machine that is able to project this victimhood, this victim complex that they are operating in, they've been doing this masterfully for years. So this is just an extension of that.
There's along those lines, there's a new book out, and I think we're going to have one of the authors on. But it's nothing. It's not huge news to you or I, or probably to most of the people who listen to this program. I mean, certainly there has been advances since 2004 and in the early aughts. But a professor at Harvard Law School has written a book, Network Propaganda, Manipulation, Disinformation, and Radicalization in American Politics, basically saying that, if you had removed Rupert Murdoch from the equation 25 years ago, the world would be a much nicer place. And so I guess maybe that's, folks' goal. You want to have impact on the world, and if you can't do it, as long as you're a superlative, it doesn't really matter which way it goes. But just to your point about what, as we sort of pivot to look at the elections that are, now about 11 days away, here's a clip of Martha McSally, which I think, and this is taken from, I think they played it on MSNBC, on maybe on Morning Joe, but it's a local news coverage of the Arizona Senate race. Martha McSally is running against Kristen Sinema, not necessarily my favorite candidate of the Democratic field, but it's better than John McCain or Jeff Flake. And but here's Martha McSally. This clip captures the dynamic of what's going on in the country right now in terms of the races. There was a report out by the Wesleyan Media Studies Group that showed that Democrats, paid advertising at least, which is the easiest thing to measure, uses the word or reference to Trump less than any political party has in a midterm election in 15 to 20 years. Wow. And on top of that, they have found that that Republicans are using immigration more than they have in also similar period of time. And here is that that dynamic distilled in a series of quick sound bites from Martha McSally as she's being questioned by a local reporter in Arizona.
Will you fight to retain pre-existing conditions as they are today?
Bram, I have fought for pre-existing conditions. I voted to protect pre-existing conditions.
You voted for something that would weaken pre-existing conditions. You voted for something that would weaken pre-existing conditions.
Not true. Right now, Bram, it's not true.
And then,
press release comes out on something that's processy, and you guys are asking me about it in this top race in the country. It's just ridiculous.
Well,
can we talk about economic opportunity?
Do you know if any of your staff is getting their health care through the ACA?
Dennis, can we please talk about the things that matter to most voters instead of repeating the Arizona Democrat Party press releases? I mean, this is just
ridiculous. From the party.
It's ridiculous, honestly. Do you have anything to talk about, like the caravan?
There you go. Do you have anything to talk about, like the caravan, the thing that's on people's minds? I mean, it's amazing.
That's staggering. I mean, that she can get away with that. There has to be a new style of journalism, or maybe just to harken back to other ages of journalism, maybe, because you can't let them get away with that. I mean, don't get me wrong. When a politician is intent on weaseling their way out, there's almost nothing that you can do, but you can really expose the fact that they are weaseling their way out. I don't know how the rest of that clip played out, but that attempt to pivot was so transparent that it should have been caught on the fly. And that's really the only way we're going to be able to hold these people accountable. But to the bigger point, I mean, the fact that Republicans are running on the dog whistle and the bullhorn of racism and xenophobia, and the fact that Democrats are timid about attaching this to Donald Trump. I mean, I don't know. Is it possible for them to really be this genuinely incompetent? Sam, I'm asking that question. Help me out here.
Well, all right. Let me address that. Let me address that second. First, okay. I will say, like, these local reporters, they were hounding her about the pre-existing conditions, and I thought they were doing a pretty good job. It's almost that the problem is that we know what she's talking about when she says the caravan. Right? Like the problem has been all of the coverage where people were sending people down to the caravan, because that is, to me, it's the functional equivalent of a meteorology report that is focusing on a rainstorm that is, off the coast of Hawaii, and it may implicate, California. I mean, it's not, it's just, is so irrelevant. The story really is Donald Trump seems to be focusing on something that's completely irrelevant. And we shouldn't even know. We shouldn't be able to know what she's talking about when she says the caravan. But the second part, I think, like, I think is, I don't know. I think there are Democrats who are perennially afraid of racializing things. And on some level, that's what's sort of fascinating about what's going on in Florida, to pivot to that, because I think everybody's seen the clip. We certainly played it yesterday. And it's been
clip.
Really viral, where Andrew Gillum is the Democratic nominee for governor, and he's running against Ron DeSantis. And we should just say, as a backstory, Gillum was not expected to win the Democratic primary.
Right.
There was, I can't remember her name now. It's been, there's somebody, but he was not expected to win. He had a late surge, and he is the most progressive candidate of that Democratic primary field. He wins. He's African-American, if people have not seen this clip or are not familiar with him. And DeSantis is... there are Republicans like this. Like, in New York, we had that guy, Carl, what was his name? Pavlon, or I can't remember, Palumbo, who, was famous for sending around Obama as, as a Kenyan faxes and ran for governor in this state. But DeSantis is like that, but was, people thought he was going to win. And he still may, but it's highly in doubt. And Gillum basically just went right at him for his racism and said something that I thought was really brilliant. He said, I'm not calling you racist. I'm just saying the racists seem to think you are. And that's a brilliant construction, I think.
Yeah.
That
it's
go ahead.
You don't recognize that, though, do you? It's totally from The Simpsons. Fox News, not racist, but number one, we're racist. And when I heard him say it, I was like, that is a brilliant use of that meme that's been going around. But I was a little, I was surprised that he went head on into it for the same reason that you outlined in your setup, because there's a lot of Democrats who are really afraid of doing that.
And I mean, what's also interesting about this race in Florida is that if Gillum wins, he's winning. He was an improbable winner in the primary, and he's running in a way that is embracing a very progressive values in a genuine swing state. This is a state that went for Obama big in 2008, went for Obama not so big in 2012. It more or less flipped by a couple 100,000 votes for Trump versus Clinton. And if Gillum wins in the swing state, he's basically going to drag Bill Nelson across the finish line too, it seems like.
Yes. And that's so critical. Like I'm from Florida. One of the states I'm from is Florida. I lived there through high school and most of college. And I'm just encouraging everyone, if you're going out to vote for Gillum, I think the last poll I saw, he was up by 7 or 8 points.
There's been a couple. I've seen 3, I've seen 9, I've seen 7, but he seems to be up.
He's going to be the one to carry Bill Nelson. So I'm imploring them, please. We don't need Rick Scott, of the last person. Like, we don't need any Republican, but Rick Scott, who's thrown $52 million of his own personal money because he's made that money off of Medicare fraud. I mean, for him to be able to go to the Senate would be obscene. But Bill Nelson is in a tough fight there. So you're absolutely right. Gillum would be bringing the more centrist, the more senior establishment Democrat, pulling him over the hurdle, which we absolutely need right now, because the last thing we need is Rick Scott to take a Democratic seat and turn it red.
And the implications, though, of that dynamic, right, where you have someone who is young, African-American, unabashedly progressive, basically carrying this old white guy centrist across the finish line in a genuine swing state, to me, is has huge implications. I mean, there are other races, obviously, we want to win, but this one seems to have like big implications as to what forms the narrative within the Democratic Party as to where you need to go to win.
Yeah. It's critical. I think in a way, it's going to be far more significant than Ocasio-Cortez. Not that we have to make a comparison, but Ocasio-Cortez was kind of like the flashpoint where we realized, wow, there's going to be a new generation of Democratic leadership across the country. But now we're seeing it play out in a very substantive fashion, in a very difficult state, like you said, a swing state, in a race that the first place I ever got called the N-word was Florida. I mean, I'm telling you, North Florida is,
on that.
Yeah, it's an achievement, right? It's North Florida is the South. It is the legitimate South, and that Gillum is able to call out this racism so directly, and I don't think he's gone down on the polls yet. I haven't looked at him this morning. It really speaks to where we have to go. I mean, it's not Nelson. It's not Nelson who's. Put it like this, Joe Biden, who is looking for some type of way for us to get past the incivility, that is not the person and the brand that's going to be able to take us into this next fight.
Yep.
And we're seeing that similarly play out in Florida.
I know that the Republicans are not as afraid of Joe Biden as they pretend to be because Charlie Kirk told me they were. And I know that I'm quite convinced that.
Can I ask you something? Can
sure.
Does it not frustrate you that a scumbag and moron like Charlie Kirk is even put on the same stage as you? I mentioned this on my show a couple weeks ago, and I was like, I'm going to ask him about it. And you just reminded me for bringing him. I mean, the guy doesn't really know anything. He simply has millions of dollars behind him, which is completely reflective of the thing that we always talk about, media and money. Conservative money in media just making stars. Like, not that it's important, but it frustrated me for you.
I mean, look, I feel like I have a job to do, and I think you certainly more than most people can understand. It's like you have a certain skill set, and I would have liked to have been a better student maybe, and maybe be in a more had or the capacity to have more academic pursuits, but. These are the skill sets I have at this point in my life, and if I can go and in any way inhibit the trajectory of any of these people, I am more than happy to do it, frankly.
Yeah.
I mean, so
well, you did that you did, but it was just the fact that this guy from nowhere gets some millions of dollars from some donors and instantly is inserted into the national conversation for the purposes of propaganda. It's like our life story right now. Like, it's happening over and over again all around the country.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not. I don't think about it that way. I don't feel like I don't know who else I would go be on a stage with. I mean, I think like if they want to do some type of academic debate with good faith people. I think there are people who are better suited for that than I. But I think I'm pretty well suited to go up on stage with somebody who's not a good faith actor, and is and if I mean that's.
So you're the man. If they're going to put these morons up there, you're the man to take them out.
I sort of feel like that is for better or for worse. I think I was probably genetically engineered for two things. One, fairly lame sitcoms to play the lead who is put upon. And when that sort of ran its course, then I think this was the next thing for me to do. But, all right, well, listen, let me ask you this. Just sticking with Florida for one more minute. The interesting thing, too, about Gillum is, I mean, this is why this race to me is so fascinating and has so much importance. In addition to what we've already said about the narrative that it sets for the Democratic Party, this is also like the ability for Gillum to impact the electorate of Florida is also super huge, right? Like, he's going to have the ability to enfranchise like literally tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people. And this to me is huge because so often we see, and we should also say simultaneously, there's an amendment for which would basically, reenfranchise like 1.5 million voters. For people who had been convicted of a felony in Florida, and right now Rick Scott's been doing it, literally handpicking the voters. But Gillum's going to impact that amendment as well, right? And and vice versa. So like turnout's going to be fascinating. The exit polls from Florida are going to be fascinating, and the implications of him winning are going to be huge. But you're in Georgia. What's going on there?
Stacey Abrams, I think she's up by 2 points, which means that she's not up. We're going to knock on doors. My friend Anoa Changa, she's really active here. We're going to knock on doors on Sunday for her, just because the turnout is so critical, especially when you have this Secretary of State running for governor who has the ability and is utilizing that ability to disenfranchise so many people, purging voters across the state, particularly in black counties. We're seeing it over and over again. The ACLU, we got a quick win this week. Well, not a quick, but an important win this week with the ACLU determining that individual poll workers cannot reject signatures, ballots, because they've made an individual call. And in the case that they do reject ballots, they have to contact the person. This was the craziest part about this, Sam, was that they could reject your ballot and not notify you. Now they have to notify you in this upcoming election. So there's some critical wins that the ACLU has been in the front of that are going to make the difference. But still, like, no one is even batting the eye that we have a Secretary of State, Republican, running for governor who's creating this situation in the first place. And everyone is still acting as though he's a good faith actor. And I guess I'm just not sure how those two things can coexist when you literally see him targeting communities of color in this race.
Is there anybody there talking about like, hey, this would be a good thing to do regardless of who wins, to reform this in some way? Like have the concept of recusal in certain instances or something to that effect?
I think it's going to take a Democrat doing this for them to actually say, OK, we want to put an end to this, because previously you've had other secretaries of state run for governor here in the state, and they generally have been Republican, if my memory serves me correctly. So no. But that kind of goes back to that questionable fecklessness that we occasionally see from Democrats, because that should be something that happens every, even if they're not in power. That has to be a war drum that they beat, because we go through this. Georgia has gone through this many times, apparently.
Is there? Do you have any sense that there's been a good enough job in talking about the voter suppression to drive votes? Like there have been occasions.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I know what you mean. I notice it. So I do this thing now where I go to church now, which is different. But they're talking about it all the time in church. In churches, like I'm hearing it everywhere, in like the barbershops. So this is having the reverse effect. It's like, you want to take this from us, we're going to show up and make sure that you don't take it from us. So that's a net positive. But these are all anecdotes. Is it actually going to be a number significant enough to overcome the purge? I don't know.
All right, let's briefly just talk about Megyn Kelly for a minute, okay?
Right.
I mean, I know I've seen you on Twitter with this stuff, and I think there's been I think people can go on Twitter and see that you've been getting into it a little bit with Cenk Uygur, who didn't think that Megyn Kelly should be fired for her latest insistence that it was okay for blackface. I mean, let's just start with let's start with the blackface question, just more generally. I mean, from my perspective, like I've gone on TV and I have said, I remember going on TV one time and saying, I can't remember what context, but I was saying somebody had gone off the reservation. And people on Twitter, were like, dude, you got to start thinking about what you're saying, because, and I grew up using that. It was just a vernacular, it was a colloquialism. Right. And then when you start thinking about it, like you realize, like, you know what? I can understand why that would be pretty offensive to people, that, the idea that a group of people were sequestered so that we could steal their land and told you can't go off of the reservation. And if you do, and somehow it's like, as opposed to like you're liberating yourself or you're taking, it is somehow you're doing something wrong. And so I stopped using it, but I also think that like I didn't have a history of maligning Native Americans. And so people were, okay. They were satisfied that I had learned my lesson. Right. Is it possible for anybody to take that position with Megyn Kelly? I mean, let's just put aside for a moment that it was clear somebody made a very, very bad professional bet on Megyn Kelly. Okay? They made a very bad bet, and it was a very expensive bad bet, and they were looking for any reason to get rid of her that could make it seem like it wasn't a function of them making a bad bet. Okay? Right. So putting that aside for a moment, because then the question is, do you give Megyn Kelly the benefit of the doubt? Who could possibly give Megyn Kelly the benefit of the doubt and why?
That's what made me so upset about Cenk's segment, because he framed it in the sense that it was that she just maybe don't know. People don't know. And the thing is like, if you don't know and you want to imitate a black person, you don't go get tar baby black coal and put on your face, because that is a direct hearkening back to Jim Crow, to the Klan using it in their movies and Birth of a Nation. That's the imitation, the insulting of black people with this tar baby. If you want to look black, you get a brown hue. And I'm making that distinction because ignorance would tell you that if I want to look black, I'm going to put on a brown face. This is not done in ignorance. This is done intentionally to irritate, to racially irritate the black community. Now, we've insulated ourselves from it to a certain extent where it's like we expect this because every Halloween we have this conversation. So not only do I not extend this grace to Megyn Kelly, and neither should have Cenk Uygur, but I don't extend this to anybody, because you had to research blackface for you to say, oh, I'm going to get this tar baby black color instead of a brown pigmentation, which most African Americans in America are brown versus a true black. You had to have done that. And when you come across it, you make a conscious decision. And this Sam, mind you, is going underneath the grace of ignorance. We're extending them the grace of saying they're ignorant about it. When you come out of your house and your home and you're a tar baby black with white lips, you are intentionally going back to an era of Jim Crow, and you're doing it for the purposes of, I don't know, is your show on radio? Because I don't want to cuss if it.
No, you can. At this point, who cares about
You're doing it for shits and giggles. You're literally doing it for shits and giggles. The Trayvon Martin murder, one of the first images that are still being circulated right now is a guy in blackface, tar baby blackface with a hoodie on, with Skittles, with a Arizona iced tea, and with a bullet wound in his chest. This is never done in ignorance. It's done intentionally. And Megyn Kelly, above all people, who made sure that she reassured the children who are watching Fox News that Jesus was white and Santa Claus was white. I mean, fine. She is well aware. She's 50-something years old. She's paid $23 million a year. She's going to walk away with $69 million a year. She is not ignorant. And to infantilize her in that way in order to insulate her from criticism or being fired is not something that a progressive leader of the independent media should be engaged in. I like Cenk. I actually tried to get on the Young Turks when I first got in this game. I mean, who else was I going to try to get on their show with? But come on, man. He knows this. And I don't get it. I honestly don't get his move on this one.
I mean, all right. Well, I mean, putting aside, what Cenk was thinking, I think just the idea that, like, look, if you're going to go on television, and this is almost distinct from race. I mean, or I should say broader than race. If you're going to be on television, and some people are defending her, saying like, well, why can't we have a conversation about race? It's like, well, if you're going to talk about something that is clearly a sensitive topic and very important to society, you have a responsibility to do a certain amount of research. So, I mean, like, even if she was to say like, look, I'm a little bit ignorant about this, well, then you know what? You're really, really almost criminally bad at your job. and you should be fired, and you should give back all the money that you're earning, because you should be so embarrassed that as a professional you would go on without researching the implications of blackface in American history. Right? I mean, to clarify, like you're saying, like if people are going out for Halloween, right? People who are not on television promoting something, but they're just going out for Halloween, like, I don't know. I feel like you could go out, right, as a Holocaust victim, and
Jesus.
people. But honestly, it's like, and people would be sort of like, I think, right to be like a little offended. Like, hey, man, that's not funny or cute. Like, what's going on there? Like, and to go as like, to me, it seems like the same thing, and it's not like, if you go as a Holocaust victim, it's very specific. If you're going,
it's too specific to not have been researched. Like you put some thought into this, and you had to have known that this is going to ruffle some feathers. And Sam, I don't mean to cut you off, but that's literally the point. The point of blackface and all of these insulting costumes. Generally, I mean, of course, you do have examples of people who are just clueless, but we're not talking about clueless items. We're talking about people who picked something that is most certainly offensive, no matter how you cut it. They put thought into it, and this is the point. The brutality is the point, and that's what makes this so insidious.
All right, well, let's say I'm going out as Idris Elba, or however you pronounce that guy who should be Bond, that guy, right? What like, and I put on like bronzer. Where am I on that spectrum?
You're on the spectrum. I'm like, Sam, what are you doing? Just go wash that off and put on the nicest suit that you can, shave your hair, and take off your glasses, and just say that you're Idris Elba. Let's just call it a day. Right.
Right. Or just go as like, I'm the white Idris Elba or whatever.
Yes.
I don't know how to pronounce his name, but the guy who should be Bond, the guy who should be the next Bond.
Listen, there's imitation that is flattery, but then there's imitation that is mockery, and that's what blackface has always been. There's never been an example, and the fact that the onus is being placed on black people time and time and damn time again for us to do the education, even of people who are making millions of dollars to do the education, is the part of this equation is so infuriating. Like, no, you did the research to figure out which hue of black you want to go with. You should do the research on your own and pay the consequence for why this was such a bad idea.
And we should say, like, people are very comfortable with certain things being taken off the table in polite society. Right?
Come on.
Like you can't go on television as a host of a show and, just on multiple occasions burp in the middle of what you're doing, or or fart, and on one hand, you could be like, well, man, it's the human body, and why not? Why are we pretending like this doesn't happen? And it's really offensive. Like, I can come up with the exact same, because this expands into like, how certain comedians can't go on college campuses and deliver certain jokes in some way. Maybe I'm teasing Ted Alexandro a little bit, appearance in a minute. But this concept of like, really what we're going through, it seems to me, and this dynamic, I think, explains our political moment as much as anything, obviously for broader issues. But the idea that like, essentially that black people, now they get to have their say in what might be offensive too.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's one step too far for some people.
I mean, I think that's basically the era, and not just black people, obviously, but trans folks, women, people of color generally. I mean, folks who have been more marginal and disempowered in our society since the beginning now have a little bit of power, and they get to say what they also think is offensive.
Sam, if I got on my show, as small as my show is, and I dropped the F word, not FUCK, but the homophobic slur, if I drop that, there is not going to be a single person in my audience, and rightfully so, who's going to say, well, let's have a conversation about it and let's educate Ben, because let's make sure that this guy who talks politics all day long and gets paid the coins that I get paid, that I need to be educated about it, and that we need more speech, not less speech. No, we have rightfully determined that there are certain things that are not acceptable. And if you call that being politically correct, I just call it not being a dick. There's no reason for us to do these things when they have been clearly demarcated as a bridge too far for people that you, in the progressive side of the equation, are supposed to be allies. Why are we even having this conversation on the progressive side of the conversation? I understand Megyn Kelly. I understand her trying to play this game. That's what she did at Fox. What I don't understand, and he's cool, I like him, but I don't understand Cenk supporting this.
Yeah, I mean, and to me, like, the conversation, just broadly speaking, has value because we understand also, I think, like, what people who watch Megyn Kelly, to the extent that there are anybody left, who watch Megyn Kelly, what they're thinking about, and like sort of what these complaints are, because it does. Again, like I can't explain what Cenk's what the reasoning is there, but that to me is less relevant than what it sort of like this broader political time. I think is so much about this, like basically a large portion of the white people in this country, just resenting.
Get off on this.
Resenting that. Non-white males get to choose what is impolite, when it's always been white males who get to choose their parameters as to what's impolite.
Right. I got hip to this, and I know we probably have to get out of here. I got hip to this the day after Hillary Clinton lost. I was scheduled to be at a Tea Party debate. I took it because why not? In Massachusetts. I was right around the corner, so I went, Worcester. And at that rally,
in Worcester? Sweet.
But it was. I came to grips with the reality that this is the point. The brutality is the point. 2 years ago, when the moderator was describing Donald Trump's slurs of Elizabeth Warren and the Pocahontas and all these types of things, the guy who was debating against me said, "Oh no, that's the part I like. I'm glad he does that. I'm not embarrassed by it." This was really the point. There's a big part of our population that enjoys this. And if we don't recognize that, we'll always be playing this game of trying to understand them. The only thing you need to understand is that this is what they enjoy.
Ben Dixon, The Benjamin Dixon Show. People can find it at thebenjamindixonshow.com, or you can hear the podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, wherever you find podcasts are disseminated. Ben, thanks so much. I really appreciate it, buddy.
Hey, it's always a pleasure. Talk to you again.
All right, bye-bye. All right, folks, going to take a quick break. Oh, geez, we're running late. And when we come back, Ted Alexandro. We are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report. We will have more to say about this later in the program. Apparently, this guy has threatened folks in this office. But the
Hilarious.
super funny stuff. But the MAGA bomber, allegedly, they have a suspect who is allegedly the MAGA bomber. His name is Cesar Sayok Jr. He was apparently a Trump rally celebrity. He has an arrest history in Minnesota and criminal records in New York and Florida. He was traced by DNA evidence, and we will have more on that in the program later. And apparently he threatened some people in this office. So, with that said, let's have our top billing for the night. That was our opening act. And now I would like to welcome to the program Ted Alexandro. How's that, Ted? How's that?
Well, that's not the first time that I've had somebody bombing open for me.
Nice. Well
how about
done.
that?
Talk about a pro, folks. So Ted, you're on the road, and let's just start with this. And we just tell people you can get more information at tedalexandro.com, and we're going to talk about your special, which has been released. I think it was released a couple of weeks ago. I want to talk about that in a second, but you're on the road right now. Where are you? Like in Indiana?
I am in Indianapolis. Yeah, and I just found out, as a matter of fact, that President Donald Trump will be here tomorrow.
So let me ask you this. Now, maybe we should play let's play your clips to set up this, because I don't know if people are familiar with your work. You've been on the program before, but you are somewhat political in your comedy, and I would put you to the left side of the spectrum in your comedy.
That would be fair.
Let's listen to at least this clip, and this is from your special. What's the special called again?
Senior Class of Earth.
Senior Class of Earth, and here is Ted Alexandro. And where was this? Where was the shot? In the
Comedy Cellar, Village Underground.
All right, here it is.
So it's the movements, everybody. It's the movements. We, the Senior Class of Earth, are tasked with doing what we can. You have to join the movement, see what's going on.
Wait, we lost sound. Sorry.
That's the gist of it, though. That's basically the gist of
it. That's it. That was the funny part, folks. And we had a technical problem. And are we about to resolve it? Hold on one second. But that is
just tease them, That's what I say. Just give them enough that they're curious. Where's he going with this?
Right. You want them to want more. Here we go.
So it's the movements, everybody. It's the movements. We, the Senior Class of Earth, are tasked with doing what we can. You have to join the movement, see what's going on, plug in, right? All the marches, the Women's March, the Climate March, the Science March. The scientists are marching. That's how bad it's gotten. They don't even like going outdoors. They have shit to research. They should be inside. They have to give up a Saturday because the president doesn't believe in climate science, thinks it's a hoax. You know the way those scientists are always trying to pull a fast one on us? Oh, you rapscallions. Fool me once, and then prove it over and over and over again, and have it reviewed by your peers until it's a fact.
All right, well, that's just a taste of it. But, all right, so you're in Indianapolis. How does that go over there? Because Indianapolis is not necessarily, I would think, like your key demo.
Well, I mean, like every city, you're going to have a cross-section of everything. But this particular weekend, I'm opening for Jim Gaffigan. So, like, I kind of split time between, I do a lot of dates opening for Jim. So I'll do like 15 or 20 minutes at the start of the show. And then I do my own dates in comedy clubs, where I kind of, it's more of a varied cross-section of, kind of doing my relationship stuff, doing political stuff. But when I open for Jim, like I am in Indianapolis, it's going to be more down the middle. Like I try not to polarize too much, like when I'm opening for him, because the crowd's there to see him, and it's a lot of families, and can be anything from 7-year-olds up to grandparents. So yeah, they're not there. They didn't buy a ticket to see a political show. So I'll drop things in, but I try to be a little more selective when I'm opening for him.
Do you get a sense of like where, like, even when you drop that stuff in, does it give you a sense of where the audience is and what might be changing? And so people should know with Gaffigan, and I actually saw him recently just by chance. He's still doing more or less Hot Pocket stuff. And I don't know if he's doing that on the road, but his stuff is, largely about like what a goofball he is. And so people are going to see like this is about as like middle American as you can get, it seems to me. And I'm just curious, do you pick up like any changes in people's perspective or no? Like politically?
Well, what's interesting is I've been touring with Jim for a few years now, and before Trump got elected, like let's say during the election cycle, I could do stuff in front of Jim's crowds about Bernie, Hillary, Trump, and it would all kind of go over. But then there was this shift after Trump won, where I guess people weren't, like Trump supporters were no longer willing to be the butt of the joke. And not that I even target, it's not like I just slam Trump, though, that's not hard to do. But, I try to write stuff that's funny, and that hopefully, anyone could kind of see the humor in. But I did notice this distinct shift that after he won, we would go to certain cities, and like I couldn't even really mention his name. It would just be like, it would be too much. It was more trouble than it's worth.
That's weird. Is that is that a function of like people feeling emboldened and sort of righteous because he won? Like we're right. What's behind it?
I think what it was I think a lot of Trump voters were probably in the closet until he won. So I think there was this natural like release for them, especially in the immediacy after he won. Like, we don't have to hide anymore. Like I'm not gonna even let you start this joke about him. There was more like, we put up with this long enough. I think it's kind of changed a bit now after a couple of years that, I'm kind of strategic about when I do it if I'm opening for Jim, but less so in my own sets. I just kind of say whatever I want.
And have you gone on to a lot of podcasts and on Twitter and complaining about how you can't go into these clubs anymore because of the political correctness of the Trump crowd?
No. I am
what?
not. I don't feel particularly. Again, like if I'm doing my own show at a club.
But wait, Ted, don't you realize you're aggrieved because they're not laughing at your Trump jokes in these venues?
Yeah, no, that's a tough road for anyone. But as a comedian, it's up to me. That's part of the job. Like depending on where you are and what the job is, because I could be doing a club gig that's my own date. I could be doing a corporate gig. I could be doing a college gig. So we constantly kind of assess as comedians, like, what is going to get me through this show? Is this more of an artistic endeavor where I'm, really saying exactly what I want to say, or is it a paycheck? Is it, you're constantly assessing those things as a comedian. So yeah, I don't feel as though, I perform at the Cellar in the city primarily when I'm home, and you get a cross section of people there too because it's a lot of tourists. But yeah, as a comedian, if you're going to stand behind your stuff, you do it no matter who's sitting there.
What is the senior class of Earth refer to? Is it, are we basically shutting it down after we're done?
This is it. What? Yeah. We are the final graduating class of Earth, it seems more and more. It's just kind of an apocalyptic reference, just that kind of impending sense of doom that we constantly deal with. So it's kind of dealing with that. But I would say that the album is probably half socio-political stuff, and I think it's also hopeful in some senses, and as you have to be, right? You can't just kind of give in to the doom and
saying
gloom.
that we're the last class on Earth of people, and then we're wrapping it up is, it's like you.
But we did graduate. Let's not lose sight of that.
Well, that's true. But you're basically like setting up That's a tough joke to follow after that one. We're all gonna die.
There is a measure of celebration. There's no jobs to be had, but we made it through.
Did you ever have a time where you would open with that we're all gonna die, and then realize like I got to put the relationship stuff first, and then lead to that?
I'm not that careful about what I open with, because sometimes I almost like the challenge of opening with the darkest thing that almost digs a little bit of a hole.
Yeah.
So sometimes that's fun to go with the new thing or the dark thing, because you can get them back, or if you have something that's more polished, you can always go to that. But yeah, I don't mind digging a little bit of a hole.
What? Give me a sense of like of how you think comedy has changed. In the course of it, particularly as it relates to politics. Because, my sense, and I'm not involved in it, I'm barely involved in that world at all anymore, but my sense is that comedians have gotten far more political over the past, 5 years or so.
Yeah, I would agree that, like, almost everyone has something political in their act now, whereas that wasn't always the case. Certainly in the Obama years. So I think by virtue of Trump being elected, it was almost like you couldn't ignore just the spectacle of it. You have to comment in some way. So I think anyone who was political maybe got that much more political, and anyone who wasn't, at least has some stuff referring to it. But I don't have this sense that like, you can't talk about this or that. I think what happens is it makes it a little more difficult. Like you kind of have to hit the target a little more dead center, and that goes for like with the PC police too. That people sometimes bemoan the fact that the PC police can't take a joke. I think no, it's just that you have to be a better comedian. You like the lazy stuff that you used to get away with, or stuff that was outright offensive or misogynist or racist or what have you, is no longer being tolerated, and that's a good thing. So I think a lot of this is actually ultimately to the betterment of comedy if you're progressing and trying to write better stuff.
Will you tell me a little bit about the Comedians Coalition? I know you were one of like the guys who were involved in starting that. What does that do?
Yeah.
What's happening?
Yeah, the New York Comedians Coalition was a kind of an organization that was started by myself and Russ Maneve, Tom Shalhoub, Buddy Bolton, a group of comedians, because for many years the pay for comedians in New York comedy clubs had remained the same essentially since like the mid-'80s. So we started this in like the early to mid 2000s, and we got over 300 comedians, everything from kind of the top regular working comics in the clubs, all the way down to kind of beginning open micers, just to kind of have the solidarity throughout the ranks. And we petitioned all of the clubs for a raise, and we wound up getting it raised. Spot pay on the weekends was like $50 since the 80s in the clubs, and we got that raised at that point to 75 to 85 was kind of the ceiling, and now it's up as high as I think 125. So it was successful in that it initiated that dialogue that it kind of opened the channels between the comedians and the clubs. And it's been an ongoing thing. Certain clubs are a little better about kind of revisiting it. The Cellar is one of the better clubs. They kind of set the standard, but it kind of opened up that channel of dialogue, so it's been successful.
And did Tom Shalhoub begin to understand the value of solidarity and forming unions?
Well, that was so funny because this was before Tom became like a Fox News contributor and all this stuff. Tom at that point was just another club comedian who I knew leaned to the right, but yeah, I didn't.
He
I
always
didn't know
kept it
that
very close to the vest back in those days, if I remember.
Literally vest too, because
Yeah.
he was always wearing like a vest and a bow tie and stuff. But yeah, he didn't. Yeah, he did. He played it close to the vest, and if you engaged in a political conversation with him, you could glean that he was right-leaning, but he's kind of leaned much further than I knew he was.
I don't know how somebody goes through that experience and then doesn't appreciate the value of of unionization and solidarity when it literally has a material impact on you.
Well, yeah, I think Tom probably does realize that. I don't know. It's probably just one of those complicated things that couldn't really be cleared up in a soundbite. But yeah, I mean, I find Tom to be funny, interesting. We differ politically, and I probably haven't talked to him in probably like 4 or 5 years.
You don't have to justify it to me, Ted.
No, I'm not justifying. I find it just as intriguing as you do, and as odd as you do.
I always tried to get him on to debate. When I realized he wouldn't do it, I stopped haranguing him. It was like a perfect opportunity to do that. But now, but Red Eye got canceled, didn't it? I never saw that show, but I was aware that he was hosting it. But it got canceled, I think, a long time ago. Somebody told me. But
I don't know how long. Yeah, it was on for a while, and a lot of comedians were doing it. But I never went on. I don't like to kind of.
Oh no, I would never go on. But he was hosting it for a while.
Yeah. It was his show for probably a couple of years.
Wow, I had no idea.
Mm-hmm.
I had no idea. Did not.
But to his credit, he was one of the linchpins of our organization getting a raise for comedians.
So let me just ask you this about you had a piece that went a little bit viral in terms of Louis C.K. and I wouldn't say I'm a close friend, but I'm a friend of Louis. I see him maybe once or twice a year, and I'm curious at your perspective on this. Like the other day, Sarah Silverman came out, I guess arguably in his defense, on the Howard Stern show and said that he had consensually masturbated in front of her multiple times. Any more recent thoughts?
Well, I mean, most of what I thought about Louis and that situation is in the clip. People can find that on YouTube. I did a set at the Cellar, and I actually did that set. And
I should tell people who aren't aware, the Cellar is where Louis has now done, I guess, 2 spots that he dropped in and did. He didn't address his situation, but he basically just tried out new material.
Yeah. So he returned to the Cellar, and then there was an article in the New York Times saying that he was back on a Tuesday, I believe, and I was at the Cellar that night, that Tuesday that the Times article came out, and I was just coincidentally happened to be there that whole week. So it was kind of on my mind, on a lot of comics' mind. It was in the news a lot that he had returned after 9 months of being away, and kind of just did a drop-in and went on stage. So yeah, I spoke about it on stage, and like I said, the set kind of covers how I feel about it. The main thing that I thought was that it wasn't being given the gravity that it deserved to kind of just show up to work unannounced and just do a drop-in. I felt as though, when the last thing he said was, "I'm going to go away and I'm going to listen and I'm going to, reflect on this," however he phrased it, and then to kind of just show up and bump other comedians, and also I just felt as though the Cellar,
casual. I mean, the idea of it being casual when you come back that
nothing's changed. Yeah,
right.
That nothing's changed. I can still just show up unannounced and like dictate the terms of my return. Like there's to me I found it curious that there's no discussion on the part of the club. The club just has the same policy. Like whenever you want, you could have come back the day after, or you could have come back the week after. I certainly wasn't alone. Maybe I was alone in voicing it on stage or publicly, but in my conversations with comedians, there was a lot of kind of concern about him coming back like that, and also the club received a lot of heat for it. The problem that I had too was that the people that were receiving heat were essentially everyone but Louis, because he kind of just dropped in, dropped out, and then everyone else was left to kind of speak for him.
That's the weird part. I mean, we should probably explain this a little bit, because I think some of like the gaffes, like, it is traditional at comedy clubs that people of Louis' stature, and not even, I mean, Louis had it's a fairly unique, in the stratosphere. I mean, there's maybe a half a dozen comedians who are in his sort of level, and there's and comedians who are sort of like the next level below can stop in a comedy club at any time and basically get up in the next slot, unless it's like a serious, unless like the headliner's on, right? Like during the weekday, it's a free for all, and that happens all the time. You get and
the celebrity drop-in is kind of a standard. In fact, that's a big part of the Comedy Cellar's allure and their reputation, is that you never know who's going to stop in at any moment.
And people literally never know. Like it literally is. It would have been pre his controversy. He could show up at any time, and people would be like psyched that he's there.
Of course.
And so the comedy club, nobody at the comedy club, there had been no policy. Nobody anticipated that he wouldn't have had a more official return. And I think that is like the part that I think people are just not aware of. They're debating whether or not it's fair for him to stay away or this and that. But it's also sort of like the mechanism, like, because there's a lot of people, I would imagine, at the door who are like, what are we supposed to do? Like,
that's exactly right. Yeah. I think it put a lot of people in kind of a difficult position where they had to make snap judgments. It really shouldn't be on the comedian who's emceeing that night, or even the person who's managing the club that night. I think
in some way it's tough to put it on the owner. It's even tough to put it on the owner in some way because of the nature of these of that relationship.
Well, I don't know that it is that tough. I mean, it's part of owning a business, and it's part of, you have to make a lot of decisions, right? So, so I think, I'm friends with Noam, and I voiced my concerns to him both in person and through email. And again, to his credit, I go on the stage at the Cellar and I say whatever I want, which is again why, I think part of what made that clip, the dynamic of what made the clip interesting was that I was saying it on stage at the Cellar. But I don't think you can paint it with one brush. And also, the thing that I was saying in the clip is, it was more of a macro discussion about the Me Too movement, about misogyny, patriarchy, powerful men acting without consequence. I talked about Cosby, I talked about Trump, and I talked about Louis because, unfortunately, he made himself part of that macro discussion.
Right. Well, folks can go to tedalexandro.com and you can pay what you want, right? Is that what you're doing with the senior class?
No, not with this one. This one, my last two specials are pay what you want. They're on my website. This one I released through All Things Comedy, which is Bill Burr and Al Madrigal's company, a comedian-owned company. And to this point, they've been a podcast network. They have Bill Burr's podcast and think for like 50 others. But this is the first special that they're distributing, and this is kind of their first foray into that terrain. So you can get it at atcspecials.com, and there's an option to buy it. There's an option to stream it, but it's on atcspecials.com.
All right, Ted. And where are you performing? Where are you doing your stuff?
When I'm in New York, I'm at the Comedy Cellar primarily. You can see all my dates on tedalexandro.com, and you'll also see the dates that I'm doing with Jim, and you'll see my own headline dates. But when I'm in New York, primarily at the Comedy Cellar.
All right, Ted. Thanks so much. I appreciate it, man.
My pleasure. Thank you, Sam.
All right, folks. That is the free show for the day, ladies and gentlemen. We will now be heading into the fun half of the program, wherein we will hear more about the incredible dangers that the Republicans are speaking of that is amassing on our border. Well, wait a second. Let's talk about this. Do we have... So we know something about the MAGA bomber. Do we know anything more than what you sent me? This guy that is Cesar Sayoc?
It's MS-13.
And
it's in the name.
Apparently, this guy was busy on Twitter. Do we have the tweet?
Which ones? No, they took down his Twitter.
Oh, they took down his Twitter?
Image on the Daily Beast article I just sent.
Oh, we'll give it to Matt.
The ones that he sent to me.
Yeah, let's see that. So
and Brendan too, right?
Yeah, Brendan's tagged in one of them.
Apparently, Brendan and Jamie were part of this guy's ire.
Some of these get a bit violent and graphic, by the way.
Yeah, we might not want to show the images.
So this guy on Twitter, his Twitter feed is down.
I don't want to scroll up too much because somebody was taking issue with she interpreted it as you defending Nancy Pelosi or whenever this was. And so Jamie was just explaining, like, it's not necessarily that you're defending Pelosi, it's that there's not a whole lot of options when it comes to replacing her, that sort of thing, right?
I said you were making a fairly narrower point than what she thought you were doing.
Yeah.
Wait, about me?
Yeah. It was like a pretty unrelated conversation about Nancy Pelosi.
And this guy just somehow found onto it, and he tweeted a bunch of different things at it. This is one of the least graphic ones, but it's basically implying that, like, gonna die in a swamp. It's sort of inscrutable. He's clearly kind of out there. And then he, like, just screenshots like that, right? Like, and here is one. I'll pull one of the more graphic ones over.
Well, one of them, he said, "We have a real special airboat tour lined up for you. See you real soon."
Oy.
And, don't show that. Jesus Christ.
What a lunatic.
Yeah. But my favorite one that he said to me, I mean, not favorite because they're all horrible, but he said, in response to the same thread, Antifa, you're next. And he spelled it Y-O-U-R. As if it's not bad enough that I'm being threatened by a crazy person on Twitter, he's also going to butcher the English language.
And he includes, like, pictures of somebody that, like, looks like he got bitten to death by a snake or something. It's really...
So what, and did you remember this? Like, did you remember getting this stuff, or was it just you?
Or was it filtered out?
Actually, there was a screenshot of one of his tweets to me at the header of the Daily Beast article on him.
Oh, well, that's
and I was
fun.
like, oh, that's good to know, I guess. Because, like, I get tweeted at constantly by crazy people who think I'm, like, the president of Antifa or whatever. So, yeah.
There you go. Well, I mean, you shouldn't put in your bio as president of the Antifa. I mean, that is the CEO of the
I will
Antifa.
say I have...
Chief Executive Officer.
I have scaled back my trolling of replies and, like, the MAGA people because I don't want any of this static.
Yeah, because they're insane and deeply
and it's a stochastic thing, right? Like, remember that, I mean, we all forget already, but that newsroom that was shot up, like, a few months ago, and then everyone's like, well, this person had a long-running grudge with the newsroom. You can't really blame it on Trump. It doesn't matter. Trump's rhetoric is increasing the pressure for this sort of stuff. So like anybody who has a grievance with a newsroom, and this guy, I mean, very explicitly on the MAGA train, but like they feel actionized to do it.
Not for nothing. You guys probably don't remember this, but there was a guy in Denver named Alan Berg who was a left-wing radio show host who was killed. Who was it that killed him? No, it was like one like a I don't know like a prototype of sovereign citizen type of person. So there's it's not without precedent to have some concern, and we try and maintain some security around here, and it's about all Krav Maga and up right now. So, all right, we got to take a break. Oh, I should also say, folks, unrelated, that Ted Alexandro's special was directed by none other than Matthew Film Guy, and I was remiss in not saying that, and I apologize. So
think of all the eBay traffic you just cost him.
I cost him a lot of eBay traffic. Do we have a Jimmy Reefer Cake today?
Ask the moms.
Ask the moms?
That's just a Kavanaugh drop.
Michael's doing his own Kavanaugh drops.
It felt appropriate for
What, do we have a Jimmy Reefer Cake?
I will if you want to promote stuff first.
Oh, okay.
Do we really need to?
Just a
I
reminder.
thought we were taking a break from Jimmy Reefer Cake.
Just a reminder.
After his anti-Semitic screed on Twitter.
What?
Some people.
Jimmy Reefer Cake had
apparently he had a meltdown last
a week ago.
Like he had like a hippie MAGA Obama style meltdown.
I believe he sort of asked like to bridge a divide between somebody on Twitter. He said he liked Indian food.
No, I forget.
Wait,
it was something.
what?
It was something like
it was
something like Western religions are bad, particularly Judaism, which which I mean I happen to agree with, but I'm just kidding.
Well, it looks like this might have addressed it. This one's called...
Whatever. He's just a pain in the ass.
Well,
this song's called Be Your Own Religion.
We'll play it in a second.
Do better for weed.
All right, hold on for 1 second.
You're hurting the brand.
Let me just say,
the weed community.
Folks, this show exists because of your support. You can support this program by becoming a member by going to jointhemajorityreport.com. When you go to jointhemajorityreport.com and you spend the pennies a day to support this programming, you are not only supporting this show, this free show, but we give you extra content every day. So jointhemajorityreport.com. Also, don't forget justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code majority, get 10% off. Today is Friday. Other days are not Friday. Some of those are Tuesdays. And on Tuesday, it's the Michael Brooks Show. Michael, I know what you're going to be talking about next Tuesday.
What is that?
Well, the Brazilian race.
Well, we did a Tuesday was the lead up to the Brazilian race, so we'll probably touch on some of that on Tuesday. Guests are Big Waz, and we are talking about NBA and some other sports-related stuff. Then Harvey K is back in studio. We're talking about Thomas Paine and the Democratic Party.
Does he live in New York?
No, he lives in Wisconsin.
And what, is he just visiting New York a lot?
He has family here.
Okay.
And then and then on Sunday, the illicit history that's coming out for patrons is with Julian Brave Noisecat, who's an indigenous peoples activist and policy analyst at 350.org. And we talked about different conceptions of property in indigenous traditions and the policy implications for eco rights in places ranging from New Zealand to India. And it's a fascinating conversation. I'd also check out, I'll mention the YouTube channel this time again because it's sort of ramping up as well. Patreon.com/TMBS.
And Jamie?
On this week's episode of the Antifada, we talked to Sham Khanna, editor-in-chief of an exciting new magazine called Commune, about the project of leftist political ed and what niche they hope to fill. Then we talked to Commune contributor Andy Battle about the political economy of mass transit and why the New York City subways are falling apart. From there, we branch out into a deep dive on the movement of people and things and how transportation infrastructure is really overdetermined right now by the necessities of capital accumulation. And we always like to end on a call to action. So lastly, we try to envision what transportation would look like if it were designed for human needs instead of exchange value, and what kind of direct action tactics we're going to need to move us closer to that goal. And we just released a bonus episode this morning for all of our patrons where we flesh out some of these utopian visions for the future of transit, including socialist planning, mutual aid, and using Jurassic Park-style super science to implement an overcoming of Guy Debord's conception of pseudo-cyclical time under capitalism.
And it's that type of left populism that would have gotten the MAGA bomber to support Bernie if Hillary Clinton had embraced those policies.
I like
Too
it when Guy Debord gets it on the chin, though.
I literally just got threatened by this guy.
Oh, no, it was months ago. He's been arrested, though.
Oh, okay.
It's okay.
We should say I initially referred to him as Cesar Sayak, but I guess that is his nickname. His also goes, Cesar Altieri Sayak. Okay, go ahead.
MS-13. MS-13.
And Matt, on Literary Hangover?
Yep, Literary Hangover, Pequot War. I'm going to put the YouTube video out. It's a history of it, so if you don't like fiction, you don't need to feel like I'm alienating you. It's just a straight history of the Pequot War and Mystic Massacre, so check it out.
There you go. We got to take a quick break. Head into the fun half of the program right after we play this Jimmy Dore song entitled...
Yeah, well, it looks like he has a new collaborator called 10 Foot Man, and this...
Oh, I'm sorry, Jimmy Reefer Kick. Oh, jeez. I wasn't paying attention.
Wait,
sorry.
what?
I thought that was on purpose.
No, that was not
I was
on
giving you
purpose.
more credit.
What did I miss?
He said, we have a Jimmy Dore song.
Jimmy Reefer Kick. Sorry, folks. I was still reading about Sayak. All right, go ahead.
Yeah, it's called Your Own Religion.
Your Own Religion. Jimmy Reefer Cake.
For Trump to say that the U.S. should allow the killing of children and civilians just because they want to milk that cow. Suck it on the teeth. Oh, the Saudi Arabian army fleet, their army is complete because they buy that crap from us. We run our economy by sacrificing souls. Then maybe our leaders need to be smoking a big fat bowl of truth from outer space, cause that's the place where the freshest taste. I'm growing that strain up here in Maine. Learn to make clothes, you can grow your own. Oh Lord. Your own religion. J.D. Peckism, Affleckism, Sam Cederism, Brooksism, Brainstormerism, Brandon Fannism, be your own ism. Got to get down. We are gathered here before outer space and all of the universe to pledge our love for all mankind, whether it be two-legged, three-legged, or 10-legged. The infinite wisdom of a religion is rocking to the rhythm of a 10-foot man. Jamie Peck preaching to the DSA. Peckism believes there's a better wayism. A rocket ship to automated gay space luxury communism. But Cederism's got a lot of fame talking about that zero-sum game. Reaper Cakeism says give them what they need. Much less war and much more weed. And it says no human sacrifices. Just let the humans have their vices. If Jesus was the Prince of Peace, then why is peace always out of reach? Come together with our nation to prevent the end of civilization. I bring you nuggets of truth from outer space. Outside your bubble is a special place. Infinite space and stars, there's lots of them. The only trouble's the lack of oxygen. So take care of this earth, the sick and the poor. It's a religion, and it can be yours. Be your own religion.
There you go. It's very expansive.
The only thing that I like about Jimmy Reefer Cake is that it's an insult to the audience that we play him.
Entering Pink Floyd runtimes.
People in check.
It's a very expansive sound for Jimmy Reefer Cake.
Very.
All right, quick break. Head into the fun half. We are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report. Let's go right to the phones. Calling from a 509 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Sam.
Yeah.
Ronald Reagan.
Ronald Reagan. How are you today, sir?
Good. Hey, so about a year ago I called and I recommended a slow but aggressive phase out of Cliff Schecter.
Is that right?
And yeah, I don't want to take all the credit. A lot of people are saying I deserve the credit. I don't know if that's true. It could be a coincidence that what I suggested happened. But I want to talk about Jimmy Reefer Cake.
Yes.
Well, I mean, with all due respect, you know, I've been listening to the show a long time. Somehow he's earned this slot in your heart. And, you know, I think every once in a while it's time to revisit old relationships and agreements, however informal, and just reassess, you know?
No, I know what you're saying. I will say this. There's two things. One is, I should say, like, Jimmy has elongated the length of songs a little bit beyond. Originally, this was 1 minute songs, and now, you know, it's like regularly like 2.5 minutes. And I feel bad about cutting them off midway, but we will revert to that practice. But it was basically what it was. If you recall, and I know you know this, Ronald Reagan, because of your longtime listenership, initially this was not Jimmy Reefer Cake's slot per se. It was people who would send in music at the end of the week. So we had the Screaming Majority. You remember those guys? And we also had one or two other submissions from, his name escapes me now, but one really good one, Pottersville. I can't remember who it was that did it, but I don't think he has time to do it as much because he had a kid, of course, and that ruined everything. And you know
Huge
that.
mistake.
You know how that goes. So it's one of those things where somebody could step up and send in more songs.
I just feel like Jimmy hates
Ronald
hypocrisy, and right. Jimmy hates hypocrisy, and in a way, for you to rail against Jimmy Dore and then to play a Jimmy Reefer Cake song when they are of the same ilk makes you, if you think about it, kind of the ultimate hypocrite. And so if anybody should want to withdraw their own name from a show, it seems like it would be Jimmy Reefer Cake to avoid his participation in the hypocrisy that's happening.
That's an interesting argument. I don't know if that's going to resonate with Jimmy, but I'm. But it's possible.
Well, I think if he's going to have any type of integrity and constancy in his beliefs, then
I mean that's his core brand proposition.
That
is his core brand proposition. No hypocrisy. And
also Jews questionable Tulsi Gabbard goddess.
Right. But in some ways, Jimmy Dore should be playing the Jimmy Reefer Cake songs.
If I recall correctly, there was a period of time where Reefer Cake very publicly, and it's just the amount of sort of backstabs that you're willing to take from this guy is astounding to me, Sam. I believe there was a period of time, and I could be wrong.
They're not exactly deep cuts.
No, it's sort of, they're definitely like sort of like a butter knife that's been shaped into a bomb.
Cuck move.
Yeah, but it is cuck move. And if I recall correctly, about a year ago, Jimmy Reefer Cake was making multiple attempts. Jimmy Dore, I think A.J. Goodman. I think basically all of our enemies in the stupidosphere on YouTube.
Jimmy Dore's too Hollywood.
Jimmy Dore is like,
Hollywood.
hey, I'll take your stupid bucks, but I'm not going to play your fucking songs, which actually makes him smarter than
we have
you
Ronald
in that
Reagan
regard.
we have Ronald Reagan on the phone, so it's worth asking about this pivoting from the Jimmy Reefer Cake thing into this. Ronald Reagan,
can I just say one more thing?
Yes.
Can I say one more thing?
Sure, quickly.
I live in Central Washington. I'm surrounded by pot shops, and I will say Jimmy Reefer Cake shows do keep me stone cold sober. So
all right, well there you go.
That's one thing. So
all right, so
having the reverse effect of what I think he's trying to accomplish.
Ronald Reagan, you are an immigration lawyer. And so you would have particular insight into the huge danger that the women and children and men who are in Mexico, 1,000 miles away from the border, walking towards us, represent to this country.
Right.
This is a clip of Secretary Nielsen of the Department of Homeland Security. She is being asked by, who is it on Fox News here? Is it Martha McCallum? Martha McCallum.
I think it's Cobra.
The
Sylvester Stallone is Cobra. He's got those glasses.
They are wearing the Ray-Bans, and they're both there. It's almost like they're interviewing themselves. But be that as it may, Martha McCallum is the premier journalist at Fox, or she bills herself, I think. Is that?
Myself. Are Guatemalans scary? Yes, indeed, self.
There are 2,500 people, mostly families, walking because they don't have the resources to come in another safe way through Mexico, presumably headed to the United States, although we don't know how many of them are ultimately, but let's just assume all of them are. And it's not exactly a surprise attack, right? Because we have over a month's worth of notice that they're walking towards us.
Isn't this what Isn't this what Reagan said could happen?
Right. This is
the Sandinistas. We're just a 5-week walk away from our southern border.
They're walking
there you
right
go.
over
Reagan
the border, but no one can say it because
Now,
of political correctness.
fortunately, it appears like Department of Homeland Security is prepared for this. Let's listen to this exchange.
Is there any scenario under which if people force their way across the border, they could be shot at?
We do not have any intention right now to shoot at people. They will be apprehended, however. But I also take my officer and agent their own personal safety extraordinarily seriously. They do have the ability, of course, to defend themselves.
So if shot at, they would shoot back?
No, I think we'd have to work through that. But I want to make it very clear we will absolutely not tolerate violence against Border Patrol in this situation. These are dedicated men and women risking their lives every day. I will not tolerate Mexicans or anybody else acting in a violent way towards our men and women on the border.
Has there been any notion that these people are armed or are interested in actually shooting at American border agents as a way of busting through the border with their kids?
I like that they thought it was a question that needed to be asked. Like, what would American law enforcement do if shot at by a brown person?
Right.
Like, as if we have any doubt what would happen. No, and I think there was an ICE Twitter account that tweeted out that there were some people in the crowd with gang ties, which, first of all, if you already know that, it should be super easy to keep them out of the country. If you've already been able to run background checks and suss out who has criminal history, then it's going to be super easy by the time they get to the border to just not let those people in.
Let me ask you this:
but yeah, I mean,
if we thought there were
ridiculous.
violent gang members in that caravan, and we could take them off the violent playing field for 5 or 6 weeks because they were doing a walkathon, essentially, would that not be great? I mean, to have all of these gang members sidelined for a month because they're walking through Mexico on a walkabout seems to me to be quite advantageous to everybody involved.
They went from violence to being human rights protesters.
Right.
That sounds like a good evolution.
This is Dia.
It seems like the worst way to try and sneak into the country, like in a giant group that's on the news every day. So, yeah, it actually makes the job a lot easier for Border Patrol. I mean, basically what I think will probably end up happening, what happens in Tijuana is we've actually given over a lot of the power to the Mexican government to basically create a waiting list. They give out certain numbers of people who can come and present themselves, and there's actually a lawsuit on that right now. And my guess is they'll try and get the Mexican government to basically implement some sort of lottery system or a waiting list, and the people will get to Tijuana or wherever they're going, and they'll just sort of languish there while we let in 10 people a day for interviews. But yeah, I mean, I had court yesterday in Seattle. I tweeted about this, and there was a lady from Guatemala and her 2 little girls, and they didn't speak Spanish. They speak a dialect, and the judge asked if she spoke Spanish, and she couldn't answer that question, and so he kept asking her more questions in Spanish. Anyways, it was, yeah, this is immigration court for you. But I sat there and just watched these 2 little girls who were scared and didn't really know what was going on, and to think about the journey of this woman and what she's probably been through, and then to imagine living a life where these people, where you felt threatened by these people in any way, is it's really sad. But there's mechanisms in place to interview these people and see who's at risk of persecution, and it's something we've been doing for years, and it hasn't caused any major crises or catastrophes. So
Well,
it's weird that it's on the news, but this election's all about Caravan and Kavanaugh. That's what Trump said the other day. So
appreciate the phone call, Ronald Reagan.
Yeah, but now the bomb is distracting.
I also will make a prediction that 15 minutes after the election will be the last time you hear about the Caravan on network news. This is sort of like the same thing that happened with Ebola. Meanwhile, President Trump addressed, where was he for the C-SPAN talk?
This was the Young Black Entrepreneurs.
President Trump was at the Young Black Entrepreneurs meeting, or addressed them in Washington, D.C. Is this? And he made a heartfelt call for unity at this White House event. And then, he just slipped up. And then, the people in the audience started yelling Soros and lock him up.
Every citizen benefits when we stop foreign countries from cheating our workers. That's what they've been doing, They're called globalists.
Pause it. Okay, so let me just tell you what my assessment is of what happened here. He had a prepared speech that he was giving to an entrepreneurial group. The Young Black Entrepreneurial Group, I would be willing to bet, we can't tell from this camera shot, but I'd be willing to bet if we were to look at the audience, the percentage of young black people in that audience would be under 35% at this Young Black Entrepreneurial event. And he went off script. He was supposed to be talking about economic innovation and about entrepreneurs and about challenges from overseas, and he went off script because it worked so well for him in Wisconsin. He just wanted a little taste of that again. Let's take it from the top.
Every citizen benefits when we stop foreign countries from cheating our workers. That's what they've been doing, They're called globalists. They like the globe. I like the globe too. But we have to take care of our people. We have to. Globalists. Come on.
There you go.
Oh, you.
Unbelievable. That was the call for unity.
I like
after a famous Trump supporter sent 12 bombs to members of the opposition party.
I like Jews, but we got to take care of our own people.
Oh, not just the opposition party, but also Soros, the guy who was cheered on. Lock him up. I like that. We don't need to. We sent a bomb to him.
Send him a pipe bomb.
Send him a pipe bomb.
Oh, you.
God.
That was a good one. Blow him up. Blow him up. Blow him up.
Unbelievable.
That's a 2020 slogan.
And then they got this guy who looks like he should be in the Caravan. And they're saying he's a fan of mine. It's MS-13. Don't believe it, folks.
Oh, he's from the Philippines, I think, this Altieri.
Yeah, well, whatever. There's people from the Philippines there, and you don't know that.
His family was from the Philippines. I think. I'm
Via Honduras.
Folks, the making the Caravan the most dangerous issue facing Americans is an all-hands-on-deck project. So, so much so that they've even asked for Gorka, who I don't know where he's living, but it's not in the gym. I can tell you that, folks.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's exactly the kind of humor I like.
I'm sorry. I just noticed. It's always interesting to me to see how when people get on TV quite a bit, and there was a story in the Times about this, when people start getting on TV quite a bit, all of a sudden they drop like 10, 20 pounds and they start dressing well. And then sometimes, like when you can tell, like when they're out of the public eye, they start to maybe sit at home and like snack too much.
The calls aren't coming.
And
let me have more Crisco.
And so here he is. You've heard Martha McCallum sort of imply that maybe these people are armed. You've heard other people imply that they're invading the country. But Gorka takes it one step further. And I frankly, I don't know where they're getting the demographic research on this, but I guess you could guess.
You can eyeball it.
You can eyeball this. It's one of the things the Romans had to do often with an invading force. that was 5 weeks out and prepared to apply for asylum.
My face is literally facial recognition software.
Here we are.
When you look at the fact that this is 80% of the caravan are military-age males, that's a potential national security threat. And at the end of the day, that logic doesn't bear weight because there's 7 billion people in the world. A lot of them are poor. So where do we stop? Do we open the borders and let everybody in? Then America ceases to exist, Steve.
It's a good point.
Yes, of course. A couple of good points. I love the idea like military age. Military age.
The military age.
The Gateway Pundit had some tweets up. I'm gonna look for it here. They keep describing the men in the caravan as virile. It's like very 19th century sort of like.
There's a lot of good workers who are going to be able to contribute to Social Security for decades.
These are some of the most strapping young bucks.
Horde of migrants. The horde of migrants are mainly military-age virile males. This is an invasion. Thousands of military-age virile, mostly Honduran males, breached the Guatemala border gate over the weekend. They didn't breach or storm the Mexican border bridge. They
walked
across it.
Yeah, that's all.
Mexican authorities ultimately let the caravan through. This is what's going to happen in America. They're going to wow. These guys.
One day my wife is giving me an allowance from her family's trust fund. The next she's with a virile Guatemalan. I see the future.
There's a reason why one has a Ford Mustang 67.
Is it still a mystery to you where the term cuck comes from?
I've had to upgrade to an IROC Z to get my virility up.
And let me tell you something, even with that IROC Z, the gym is not the only thing that I'm not getting to, if you know what I'm saying.
I need to call Bill O'Reilly so we can be first on market with some virility pills.
We've got the jaws of life to expand the size of my Mustang side door so I can get in.
I'm not getting booked next week.
I'm a doctor, damn it.
Not getting booked next week? Fine.
Whatever.
Haagen-Dazs it is. Could Hannity, could Sean use me later? No. I will be a double anchovy pizza, please, with extra cheese, garlic breadsticks, as well as a liter of Sprite.
Let's go to the phones. You call him from a 266 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
What about the Pajama Boys?
All right. Well, now, who is this? Where are you calling from?
It's Matthew calling from London. So I'm not going to try and do an impression, but I always just appreciate the Pajama Boys insult because it's so ridiculous and it just doesn't mean anything. Three things, and hopefully we can get to them for you guys. I was just wondering, do you guys think that Steven Crowder is going to eventually ask Alexa what transvestitism is?
His vest item is?
Is he going to ask Alexa, what is a transvestite?
Oh, a transvestite. Oh, I don't know. I mean, really the question that Steven Crowder should ask his Alexa is, do I have the fortitude to debate Sam Seder after Sam Seder announced that he specifically avoided going to Politicon so he wouldn't have to debate me?
No, you are not courageous enough to face a middle-aged Jew who likes facts and figures. You are a coward.
I mean, that's the question that Steve Crowder has to ask himself.
A little biased, Alexa.
And frankly, it's the question that fans of Steve Crowder have to ask themselves. Look, this is someone that you've tuned into. Yeah. You've watched Steven Crowder. You've put so many of your tiny brain eggs in his basket, as it were, and he's not protecting them. He's letting you down. It's embarrassing for Crowder fans to Steven Crowder act this way.
Change my mind, Sam.
Jew Sam Seder is practicing the art of war.
There you are.
On Crowder.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you guys, the voting compulsory thing. Sam, what's your thoughts on mixed member proportional representation, maybe for the House of Representatives, or for some kind of mixed member proportional representation system?
I'm not sure I follow what you mean, mixed member. Like some from at-large, some from districts?
Yeah, so the way Germany runs it is let's say that the votes were 60% Democrats, 40% Republicans, but the seats are all like most of the geographic seats are won by Republicans, but the population is 60% Democrats. Then what they do is...
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I think they do that in... they certainly do that with like electoral votes. Let's put it this way. I think Maine and Nebraska in this country do that with electoral votes. And I think it makes more sense to do that with our electoral votes in this country than I do Congress. I think Congress, what should happen is we should have independent, a mechanism to do districts that are at least in some respect competitive, and we don't have such a high percentage of what they call wasted votes. And until we get those in every state, then I think Democrats should gerrymander in a way that it gives them more power. I think, we have a Senate which already does that on some level.
Okay. Yes, I don't want to bant on too much, but what the two things you want, obviously, from a democracy is, I guess, one, that is proportional. So if people vote, say, 55% for Democrats, then Democrats should have roughly 55% of the seats.
Right.
But then, obviously, the problem is also that you need local representation so that, Senator from Texas actually fears the voter of Texas and looks after their interests, rather than maybe doing what's good for the country but could hurt Texas, or what's good for the party but could hurt Texas, if you see my point.
Yeah.
And the cool thing about mixed member, so like in South Africa, it's all party lists and it's proportional, but because it's party lists, the DMP, it fears the party and the leaders of the party and not like the local people.
No,
or the
man,
electorate.
I get it. But I'm arguing to you that we have that in this country on some level between the Senate and the House, right? We have people who are elected statewide in this in this country. The problem that we have is that we have a Senate that was set up to be rather undemocratic, and despite the fact that we made a provision, I can't remember what amendment it is now off the top of my head, that had direct election for the Senate, we still have minimally populated states that have an outsized amount of power in the Senate, and that's sort of what is more problematic for us. But appreciate.
I understand that. I need to do last one. Could you guys recommend any good starter books or reading on feminism?
Oh, that's a good question.
What about feminism would you like to learn?
Well, just something that's comprehensive and not too deep in on the theory, because I guess I'm recovering patriarch / current patriarch. I'm a father and stuff, but it's become pretty clear to me that patriarchy or chauvinism is in its current form toxic. Needs to be reformed, and I don't agree with all feminist thought, but maybe what I need to do is actually understand some of the theory behind it before I make up my mind, on how I'm evaluating certain people.
I mean, that's a good question. There's so many sort of like different. There's so many books that were important depending on the wave of feminism that we're talking about on some level. I mean, I think there's. I haven't read it yet, but I've heard very good things about Rebecca Traister's most recent book. I mean, it depends on, there's no class consciousness in that. Maybe I'm not sure if, but there's.
what do you want to know? The history of feminism, or like the theory? And there are so many different kinds of feminism. Like, are you coming from a leftist perspective or more of a liberal one?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that I'm sort of classical liberal. No, I'm joking. I'm sort of like centrist, center-left. But what would be considered center-left in the UK would be considered kind of far-left in the US. So say I'm coming from a center-left perspective.
Well, I mean, I'm really into Marxist feminism, and I think that is really important as a base for understanding where patriarchy comes from. If you want to read about social reproduction theory, Nancy Fraser has done some very good work on it. Tithi Bhattacharya, we had her on our show, because I think it's really important not to frame women's oppression as this trans-historical thing that has always existed, because that is not true. It arises.
It hasn't. And I've taken a lot of time, but if you don't mind me sharing something, just you make a really good point. I'll share a link to you guys on Twitter, because I know I am, but there's a military historian called Gwyn Dyer who's done some excellent stuff. I think I sent a link to one of you guys, but he did a really good documentary in the mid-90s that covered globalization, but also went into patriarchy and how it's not natural that originally agricultural villages would have been a matriarchy. It's all proven from like the grave burial styles and the religious symbols all being fertility and female, and that at some point the switch was flipped, men took control, and the god emperor, the god king, basically became a thing.
I would just
now
make sure to read Joanne Reed
basically
as well.
If you're interested in that particular process, I just started reading Caliban and the Witch by Sylvia Federici. The full title is Caliban and the Witch, Women, the Body, and Primitive Accumulation. And it shows how early capitalism coincided with witch hunts and witch burnings in a very direct way, and formed like primitive accumulation basically means like, you know, why do some people have to work for a wage and other people own the places people go to work? Is it just because the bosses are like better and smarter? No, like somewhere down the line, someone started playing by some new rules and took some shit that wasn't theirs. And as it turns out, that extends to women's bodies. So,
of course,
Sylvia Federici,
probably the first, but
really good on
so
that.
The nice thing about Gwyn Dyer is whether you guys disagree with him or not, I think you'd all agree that it's good to have a different angle to look at things. Whether you agree with an angle or not, looking at a problem from a different angle can often say like, okay, well, I don't agree with everything, but there's 5% of what this person says is really of value to me.
Yeah.
Maybe it changes how I think, or it gives me another tool to talk to somebody else about it, even if they don't agree with, say, my theory reading of it, just another angle. We can get on board with the final destination, if you see what I'm saying. But thank you very much for your time,
Thanks,
guys.
Matt.
I really appreciate it.
Right. Thank you, Matthew. Let's go to the phones. I would say, like, I don't know. I mean, I think, like, if you want, like, a 101 tour, like Angela Davis and Betty Friedan type of stuff, like, would be good starts, it seems to me.
Bell hooks in that very basic intro place, I would put.
Take a class at a local community college. I'm sure you could get all those in an intro course.
Josh in Chicago, is this you, Josh? 847?
Yes. How did you guess? Is it because I'm such an alpha male?
There's a couple of
No,
of
Josh,
area codes
let me
that
tell you
I
something.
have mastered.
It was not because you are
The
such an
alpha
alpha
males are
male,
bad.
Josh. We can promise you. Believe me.
What's on your mind, Josh?
Oh yeah, I know, right, Lingo. First thing, two things today. First, actually, since it's Casual Friday and people are recommending, it's the day where people recommend stuff. I wanted to recommend the movie 22 July. It's on Netflix right now. It's a docudrama about the Norwegian attacks in 2011 in Oslo. I'm sure people remember that.
Okay.
And also a potential guest, the director Paul Greengrass, said some interesting stuff about globalism and the rise of our right wing.
Matt and I would be very excited about that. Paul
Yeah.
Greengrass.
Why? Because you like the Bourne Identity?
We like the Bourne Identity.
That's a cool movie. I saw the 22nd of July. I didn't think it was such. I mean, I didn't think it was a good movie, to be honest. But I think that the thing that's relevant is that Anders Breivik, this terrorist, his courtroom speeches are essentially like Bannon speeches. I mean,
Yeah.
you could see a prototype of everything we're dealing with in this terrorist attack in Norway.
Why are you trying to inhibit Bannon's speech?
Oh no, exactly. That's good. No, I want.
What
Bannon
else you
to
got,
speak.
Josh?
And the other thing is, I want to play John from San Antonio for a second. I talk about Bernie running for president. Warren is still my clear number 2, but I'm starting to feel like I'm not sure how great of a candidate she actually is, considering all of the things we've gotten. She once again stepped in it in regards to her Native American heritage by saying that she did it because of for transparency reasons. But I also think that I'm not sure how capable of leading a movement she is that we need to actually sustain, for example, life on Earth. I mean, I'm of the opinion we really need to abolish capitalism, and I think Bernie is at least leading a movement, even if he's not a capitalist, or even if he's not necessarily a socialist. He's leading a movement that is directly criticizing capitalism, and I'm just not. I think for me, Bernie is still the clear number 1. And also on foreign policy, her foreign policy is either right wing
All right, but that's good. But this is not
incoherent.
But John from San Antonio would not be talking about the 2020 elections 10 days out from the midterm.
He probably wouldn't be talking about abolishing capitalism either.
John from San Antonio would be saying, watching Elizabeth Warren campaign is like watching a preschooler try to play at the U.S. Open, okay? She's not good at it.
All right, but Josh, appreciate the call.
Boom.
Thanks.
And I agree with you.
Let's go to a 210 area code, because I think I have Malcolm McLaren right here.
Good afternoon, Sam. It's John from San Antonio.
Oh, John from San Antonio. How are you?
You mean Marshall McLuhan?
What did I say? Malcolm McLaren?
Yeah, you said Malcolm McLaren.
It's been one of those days for me.
Yeah.
Jimmy Cake, Jimmy Dore, Marshall McLuhan. Go ahead.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, I voted yesterday, and I had to wait an hour in line. But in the end, it was the longest I've ever had to wait. But in the end, it was satisfying. So I was happy about that. Yeah, I've been talking about the Wisconsin 1st District race for many months between Justice Democrat Randy Bryce, and he's running against Brian Stile in that district, which is currently represented by retiring Paul Ryan. You interviewed Bryce for Ring of Fire. Bernie Sanders rallied with him on Monday in Kenosha. And in the latest poll by Change Research, he was leading Stile 45-44, just 2 weeks after finding Stile up by 2.5 points. The earlier October poll found that Bryce had yet to consolidate Democratic support. 8% were still undecided, 3% compared to 3% of Republicans. 2 weeks later, the story has flipped. The number of undecided Democrats is down to 5%, while Republicans' support of their candidate is wavering considerably. 12% of the Republicans are now undecided, and another 6% support Bryce.
Well, that's a pretty good trend, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's just one poll, and the poll isn't that great, but I mean, it was the poll that the organization that predicted Gillum was going to win, though. So I mean, it has something going. So that race is number 57 on my most flippable district, and it shows the potential of Democrats winning up to 45 to 50 seats. 538 currently has them winning 39 seats in their current classic mode.
So people should be aware of what's going
on
here. That, John, you're basically saying that under the John from San Antonio formula, you're making a bolder prediction than 538, and you're basically putting your flag in the sand, saying I want credit for this if it turns out to be in the 50s.
Well, not necessarily. I'm saying that there's so many races that lean Democratic that it could come to that total. I mean, basically, like I was talking on my call on Tuesday, out of the 26 seats that I have as toss-ups, basically 538 has them winning almost all of them, to where if you just look at polling, they're only going to win about half of them. So they're already on the edge. But, I mean, if you look like, 44 to, let's say, 65, they could win some of those races, like I was just talking about with the Bryce race, Camp-Najar race. I mean, like Williams was just up in Montana in a poll that just came out today. I mean, all of these races, they're super tight, and they have Democratic opportunities.
What do you think in Texas, John? I mean, it feels to me like Beto O'Rourke is now starting to close a little bit. Is that? Do I have the right sense of that?
Yeah, but I mean, it's still 4 points. He had 2 polls within 4 points, and one within 5, then one within 6. So he's closing slightly, but I mean, it's still slightly above the margin of error. And I mean, that's an absolutely must win. I mean, the best scenario is, I mean, I think everybody thinks Heitkamp's race is completely gone, and also in Missouri that race is also going to be extremely difficult to win, even though it's still a toss-up race. There's been a lot of Republican pollsters that kind of can skew the polls on that. So it's hard to say. Then you got to win in Arizona and Nevada, and then you got to pick up one more race either in Tennessee or in Texas. And so I think that's why it's only at about a 15% race. And my hope is actually more in Bredesen because, I think that the really bad polling that he got was when he went against the Kavanaugh nomination, and there's been one since then where he was back, close to being even. So anyway, so on the other hand, if the Republicans do better than expected, we may not know the winner of the House until 3 weeks after the election because of all of the mail-in ballots in California. Wow. There's 6 races that are super tight in California, and then there's the Washington's 8th district. And so that's going to be a really bad night if the whole country is like looking at these races and counting numbers. I guess it's going to be similar to 2000. To some degree. So, I mean, I don't think that's going to happen, but in a bad night, that could happen. And so,
all right.
So, do you have any comments?
Go ahead.
Do you have any comments or questions about this? And I don't know if I want to talk about some governors' races if I can.
All right, just quickly. I'm just curious what you think are the most likely Democratic pickups in the governor race.
Well, I think Gilliam's race, it's definitely going to pick up. He's been polling consistently above the margin of error. I think he has a 5-point lead, and I think he's definitely going to win that. Gretchen Whitmer in Michigan, Janet Mills in Maine, and Pritzker in Illinois. And the good thing about Maine is that they only need to flip one state Senate seat to get the trifecta, House, Senate, and the governorship. And so I think that's going to happen. And also with the Pritzker race in Illinois, that's also going to be a trifecta. So and then also in Wisconsin, Tony Evers, I think, is going to win. Fred Hubbell in Iowa. Even in Kansas, I think Laura Kelly has a good chance of beating Kobach. And even in South Dakota, if people remember the Ronald Reagan, he mentioned when he did his famous mockery of me that he mentioned Kristi Noem, and and she's running for governor.
Notice.
And
so in other words, the final joke is on Ronald Reagan because even his impression of you may have gotten a long shot correct.
Well, Reagan's a method actor, so if you want to do a proper John impersonation, you need to get the numbers right.
John, I'm sorry if I misrepresented you before. Did you hear what I said? I just want to make sure that I was being truthful.
Yeah, I mean, okay, this is not something I ever really wanted to talk about. I mean, I just believe in the heavily reformed capitalism. I believe that, like this show, I think is basically a capitalist show. I mean, that's how you make your money. And, the arts, which I've supported all my life, and that's why I moved to New York City and probably why I'll move back to New York City soon. and I think that they'll have a hard time.
Oh.
Come visit the studio.
I think
definitely.
the arts are going to be great once we transition from capitalism to socialism.
Will you come visit the studio, John? If you come to New York?
Absolutely.
Thanks,
that'd be
John.
great.
All right, appreciate the call.
yeah. I
Talk
look
to you soon.
John, do you think
to
that Sam is a
continuing the
globalist?
conversation.
Do you think Sam's a globalist?
Let's
John?
go to the phone. Call from a 203 area code. Who's this?
I would like to do alt-right, John.
Yes, hello, Sam?
Yes.
Hello?
Hello.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi. I'm Nick from New Jersey, and I'm calling because you went over a story last week on Thursday, or it wasn't you, it was Michael, and it was about, I think it was ABC who did some coverage of Identity Europa, this like
NBC.
far right group. Yeah, it was really weird, like why they would give any coverage to these people. But I actually have some cursory experience with them because of the right-wing gaming culture. They're a part of this like gaming community on a Minecraft server. At least one of them was, and there was a Rolling Stone article. I think it was about. Let me see.
All right. Well, people can find it, but go ahead. Make the point.
It's yeah. So I mean, I don't know. I just think it's really weird that a lot of these guys came from this one Minecraft server called Civcraft. Anyways, that's why I wanted to call about.
Very strange, but appreciate the thing.
Yeah,
I mean,
it
these
is
are
very
these are things that we got to keep an eye on.
Bannon was pretty adroit about using those gaming platforms for
That's
Trump. I mean,
Milos Yiannopoulos. That's where he came from.
Oh,
That
Yabba
whole-
Dabba Doo. Well, that was the whole the Gamergate thing. Right.
Calling from a 203 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? 203. That was a ghost. Calling from a 707 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, this is Logan. I just wanted to give you an update on the Sonoma City Council race. It's actually kind of interesting. We've had a ton of money spent in this race and had like 3 anonymous mailers and a website attacking one of our candidates for going to Burning Man and wearing some amount of scantily clad clothing, which is to be expected at Burning Man. We've also had, I'm running in the race, and I've been attacked for being a welfare candidate and supporting rent control. And there was an article that came out, or that this mailer that came out said that renters are coming after homeowners and that they're going to be, if I'm elected, that $100,000 in home value be wiped away. And this is a town of basically 10,000 people, super, super small town. And it's just amazing that these kind of tactics are being used all over, even in small towns in our country.
Wow. Well, when's the race?
Yeah. November 6th is the day. So
it's going to be.
It looks good. I think there's a good chance, and it's been a lot of fun. The other thing I wanted to say is, if you guys want to go after Steven Crowder, please do, and you guys got to start tweeting at him because I want that to happen so bad.
All right. Well,
I want that so bad.
Help us out with that. Appreciate the call, Logan.
Alexa, what does cuck mean?
We should bring in an Alexa and do that.
Yes.
Calling from an 865 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? Got to be quick. We'll race through some of these. Hi. Who's this? Hello. Hello.
Jonathan, I'm from California, but I'm calling in Brazil.
Oh.
Vote for Haddad. Bye.
I'm sorry. Got to keep
Lula Livre. Peace out.
Calling from an 814 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, this is Jeff from Kansas.
Jeff from Kansas? Hello?
Yeah.
Jeff from Kansas. What's on your mind?
Here.
What's on your mind? Got to be quick.
Yeah. I was wondering, I've sort of become sort of a unhealthy news junkie since 2016 in a lot of ways.
Understood.
And I was wondering what you all do to sort of, I don't want to say like maintain hope, but like avoid sinking into hopelessness.
Bourbon, is helpful. Vodka is pretty good.
Right.
I engage in probably futile activism around the goal of transitioning to socialism before the human race dies out.
I meditate, and also, I don't know, hang out with friends, go outside, take a run, listen to Dipset.
Yeah.
Enjoy life.
The world was always going to end.
Yeah.
I mean,
Go to
I
parties.
think honestly, I think like you
watch Narcos.
It's hard. I mean, I think you need to be able to keep you need to figure out some type of balance of keeping it at arm's length but also, remaining engaged. It's very difficult. I mean, I found it really difficult during the Bush years, frankly, because things were much more isolated in many respects if you were concerned about this stuff. I mean, the only encouraging thing I can tell you is that there's a lot of people who share your perspective on what's going on. And that is almost necessarily hopeful, right? It's,
right.
And that's the only thing I can tell you is that there's the thing that was so difficult during the Bush years was feeling so isolated and being the only person you felt like half the time that actually cared that we were actively killing tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands. Ultimately, it was hundreds of thousands.
Wasn't it like you, Chris Hayes, and like two other people, basically?
I mean, Hayes was a pretty young guy at the time, but there was no, particularly when we started Air America, there was no other identifiable left-wing outlet in the country. I mean, maybe Phil Donahue, whose politics were, what we would consider today to be pretty mainstream liberal
Now
politics.
you and Chris Hayes are nothing but sellouts, kowtowing to the establishment wing of the Democratic Party.
That's what
While
happens.
you submit to the corporate
It's
state.
much more comfortable once you get to be a sellout.
See,
too,
here's
I'll
my
tell you that.
vision. How's about this? How's about Donald Trump, J.R. Bolsonaro? They become president, right? Then all of a sudden you can't put a pretty face on capitalism anymore. And then it accelerates, and then people vote for Jill Stein.
Appreciate the call, Jeff. Hang in there.
Yeah, don't forget to do self-care. It's
Fucking
important.
sell out.
All right. Calling from
The
a
caller's a fucking
six
sellout.
seven, it's calling from a 678 area code. Who's this?
Is this me?
Yeah.
Hi, big fan of the show, Mr. Cedar.
Thank you.
I'm Charles.
Charles.
Calling from Georgia.
All right.
And I would like to talk with you about that proposal you sent me. Let's see. Blaming the voter, how the American people have failed us, and how to fix that with revolutionary Cedarism.
I'm sorry. Did I send that to you?
Don't try to commodify other people's jokes into weak phone calls. We appreciate the support, Charles. Try again later. Thank you. Goodbye.
Wow. That's kind of I don't know.
Wait, what?
That's amazing.
Did something happen?
Wait, Charles? Charles, I'm sorry.
I got distracted for a second. Say again?
I'm sorry. What? I sent it to you? Did you say? Are you serious? You're going on?
No. It's a joke. It's a sort of a bit.
Oh,
It's part of a bit, Sam.
Well, Charles, come on, man. We don't have time for this.
That's what I just said.
Oh,
As
all right.
Bill Clinton to make it a little bit
All right,
lighter.
fine. How about this?
Bye,
I sent an
Charles.
IM to the show about how to maybe deal with the Senate. Could you later read it and give me your thoughts?
Goodbye,
Okay,
Charles. Don't ever call again.
I like him.
Don't
Sweet.
you ever call this number again.
Call from an 860 area code. Who's this? Got to be quick. Quick. 860. 860 going once. 860 going twice. 860 good day.
Hey, High Majority Report.
Calling
I have
from
a
a
half-baked idea related to a joke most of you don't remember.
Call from a
And here it
408
goes.
area code. Who's this? Got to be quick. Who's this?
Hello?
Hello? Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. 408.
Okay, cool. 408 calling from San Jose. I was
What's your name, San
watching
Jose?
some videos you guys had about.
What's your name?
Hey, I was watching some videos you guys had about IQ debates,
Right.
and while I'm not a apologist, I think there's a middle position that I'd like to talk to you guys more about. But if we are short on time, then I'd like to call it another time.
What's? Just give me 1 second. Stop. What's your middle position?
So I do think differences exist, but I don't think that's justification for any sort of superiority.
You think differences between races exist in terms of IQ?
I think in terms of IQ, yes. But
Do you
I
think
don't
IQ
think you can
measures
cast,
anything that is real?
yeah, I would argue that that is true. That's correct.
Yeah. Based upon what?
Are you asking based on what studies or?
I'm asking you, based upon what do you think the IQ measures aside from what you get on this IQ score? I mean, I know it's called intelligence quotient, but that's a made-up name, right? It wasn't. It's just the name that somebody gave to that test.
Well, I mean, yeah, in the way that things are made up, in the way that names are. Sorry, I'm a little nervous. I'm a little shaky on my words, but
right.
In the same way that child's names are made up, but I would say it's an accurate name and it has a predictive validity to it.
Do you think that it's possible the fact that it's predictive has a function is a function of the fact that society is structured in a certain way and that the test only measures to what extent you might be successful in a society that is structured in a certain way? In other words,
see, that's where I think the waters are mixed. I think it's both. I would say that there is systemic oppression or bias for I guess whites in this case, if you want to go to the main controversy. But I would say that the test also does measure differences between, say, Asians, and I mean, as I saw your videos, you say Jews, but I would say the systemic oppression is there.
But don't you
I would say
think that the test? I mean, like for instance, if I set up the world of athletes, we're going to measure athleticism based upon how well you hit a small ball that is dimpled with a metal stick. And I ask a bunch of questions about one's aptitude about that. It will be predictive of that, right? Like, I mean, there's a certain arbitrariness that is then considered to be some type of absolute. And the idea that a test
I think
developed within the context of a certain culture would predict the success of people, would be predictive of success within that culture, only tells you that it's measuring what the society has structured as being important in some fashion. And obviously it's being structured by the people who have power.
Okay, I would agree that that's a possibility, and I would say that that's a strong argument. Yeah, but I would also say that there's not enough research on the subject right now.
Well, then when there's more when there's more research and you can actually make
claims are being barred.
Hold on. When there's more research and you can actually make an argument rather than a series of assertions and telling me that my argument is strong, then I would take the next step of actually publicly arguing it. But you can't call in and say it's ultimately my feeling that this thing is right in some way and have no way of establishing it. Like, yes, it may be predictive, but I can also tell you what's more predictive about success. What's your zip code? What's your area code, rather? And if your area code is one that is wealthy, I can tell you with a fairly good record, I can predict the trajectory of the vast majority of people who live within that area code. And that is my IQ test.
I hate the
What
caller.
area code do you live in?
How many books did your parents have? I hate the caller for 2 reasons. First, I don't support IQ rice science. And 2, we were supposed to leave 15 minutes ago. I hate you, San Jose.
It's Friday.
I hate
it's Friday.
you
We usually go a little
so
long.
much.
All right, we're going to read some IMs.
Nobody else call in about that shit, please.
Don't do it.
Please.
Can't help it. Oh, this is an interesting thing. This is pretty telling. Even Newt Gingrich understands what the Kavanaugh fight was about. And now, as he sees most of his opportunities waning, he knows that he's got to give a little bit if he wants to continue to be interviewed by the Washington Post. Has there ever been like a former politician who's been more interviewed than this guy who served for a couple of years in the House? Honestly, and was kicked out by his own party? Newt Gingrich continues to tantalize, and partly because he will actually occasionally like let the open the blouse a little bit, let the whatever they say, whatever that is. And here it is where he's talking about the Kavanaugh nomination and why it was Republicans were so adamant to have Brett Kavanaugh and particularly the White House.
This is a billionaire who has fought lawsuits his entire career.
Pause it for 1 second. The question was, do you think Donald Trump is going to be able to withstand the potential Democratic investigations and perhaps indictments that could follow or legal challenges that could follow the midterms with the Mueller investigation?
This is a billionaire who has fought lawsuits his entire career, and he's never noticed them. He doesn't care. That's why he has lawyers. So they can come at him from 100 levels. He'll just hire 100 lawyers and say, call me when it's over. I got to go do other things. I'll see I'm going to, China, or I'm going to campaign.
Play golf.
But I don't think he has any fear of the Democrats' ability to investigate.
But he's been raising that fear out there on the
That's because he wants everyone to go vote.
And what about if they subpoena his tax returns?
Then they'll be trapped into appealing to the Supreme Court, and we'll see whether or not the Kavanaugh fight was worth it.
Oh, what?
Did he just say that out loud?
Yep. There you go, folks.
He's also arguably the creator of our modern politics, which is another reason people pay attention to him. I mean, he set the template for everything you see today. I mean, along with obviously Reagan and Nixon and so on and so forth, but Gingrich, I think, is kind of like an
He put his personality on
He's
it.
an MVP of fascism in America.
Didn't he coin the term feminazi for one?
I thought that was
Limbaugh, but
they all those
not
old white men blend
terribly
together in my head.
tough to, not terribly easy to distinguish. All right, let's go to some of these IMs and then we'll get out of here. V's Patton, Sam, stay after Crowder. Tweet him, do more videos. What I think would be incredibly effective is to go to a university where Crowder is doing a Change My Mind segment and debate him.
And go change his mind.
They announce where they're going in advance. Have Brendan film it, upload.
You should just follow him everywhere.
I love Sarah Palin. Hey, Sam, your argument with Jamie last week, I totally agree with you. Jamie is going to get us Trump 2020 or Rick Scott 2024. There's a lot of votes out there. Maybe the left should start like a left-wing sovereign citizens movement to appeal to the racist voters. Serious calculus. The fact that Trump is trying to push this narrative of Middle Eastern people infiltrating the caravan is proof that the center, left, and independents acknowledge the humanity of people fleeing the problems in Central America.
I'm a sovereign citizen. It's like your own safe space.
Gabe formerly from Chicago. In this news cycle where people are talking about false flags, can we take a moment to mediate on how much more obnoxious this would be if Alex Jones hadn't faded in obscurity? It's true, right? It's amazing what deplatforming somebody will do. Brendan for co-host. I keep imagining Trump talking on a cell phone, knowingly being monitored by the Chinese, crowbarring his thoughts on Chinese food into the conversation.
And the service was terrible.
Senator Pug, Adam Schiff came and spoke at my union last night, was overall positive. He gave a speech in which he mentioned that Democrats need to be on top of automatic voter registration, making voting a national holiday, national redistricting, etc., which was good to hear. I asked him a question. I asked him about other Democrats contemplating court packing and term limits. He said it would be hard to do that, but Democrats need to be better about the courts. Sort of a non-answer answer. Thank you. Recover Bras. I'm from Brazil. My father was imprisoned and tortured during the dictatorship of 64. My brother and I grew up to an enormous amount of anguish, which we are both still trying to sort out in our personal lives. I recommend therapy for everybody, incidentally. But a couple of years ago, more or less, my brother decided to turn right conservative. It's been extremely painful to see him support Bolsonaro, but he seems to be convinced that our father was tortured by people who learned torture techniques from the communists, meaning he was tortured by the ones whom he was trying to defend, basically explained. He bases a lot of this on videos of Yuri Bezmenov, a KGB defector. He seems to ignore that torture existed before communism, seems to ignore that my father was fighting as a resistance, not as an offensive to impose communism. I don't think he's a fervent fan of Jordan Peterson, but he does admire him. I have no idea how to convince him otherwise. When I give my point of view, he calls me simplistic. I have no idea what's happening, but something's not right. We cannot have cool-headed conversations. It's too personal for both of us. Any ideas from you are welcome. When confronted with Bolsonaro's clearly advocating for torture, he mentions that Carlos Magilla wrote a book as a guerrilla fighter which also advocates for violence, and we have a street with his name and calls this a double standard on the part of leftists. I'm extremely confused and tired. I have no idea how to change his mind back. He's 36. He's been a leftist basically all his life. This turn happened maximum 2 years ago, and it's mind-boggling to me.
It's outside of the realm of my comprehension. But it's obviously, I mean, the thing that kept coming up at the Jordan Peterson conference, and it's dissatisfying for people, but there might be some answers, I think, in terms of how information is presented. But like, this stuff is emotional. So whatever was going on with him is obviously highly psychological, emotional distress. And I don't think it has, I mean, you literally just had a democratic government that, you know, from the left that governed Brazil without torturing people for over 10 years. So it's insane.
Good luck.
Yeah, I don't.
And I am really sorry to hear that, by the way. I mean, first and foremost, that's awful.
Thames Darwin, Sam Allenberg was killed by members of the Order, an offshoot of Aryan nations in Idaho. Fun fact, one of his two murderers, David Lane, coined the famous 14 words you may have heard of. Zodek, Sam, I love you, but the degree to which you are closed off to Jamie's perspective and dismissive of her comments is rubbing me the wrong way. The tension between you guys sometimes makes it hard to listen to the show. Also, any social historian will tell you that race as an economic category defined by skin color is a modern institution that grew up alongside capitalism and the modern nation state, and all of these institutions were co-constitutive.
That's what Matt and I said.
I don't think that anybody is arguing that. What I was arguing is the idea of I don't know if you would call it racism, but the idea that I can take that person's stuff because they belong to a group that's less than me, without a doubt, precedes capitalism.
So maybe
real quick, because I want to go, and it's the end of the show, but Europeans were barbarians up until the Enlightenment. They didn't need a justification for oppressing people or taking their things. They did it because they could. Only once you had the concept of natural rights did you then need some sort of justification for what you were doing to other people. And that's where race science came from originally. But it's I have a longer version of the answer, but I'm going to save it for another day.
Okay. Another side. Sounds like Twitter facilitates violence. Any C-suite level member of that company arrested yet? Can we start talking about it and talking this shit as seriously as it is? I mean, I think, human interaction promotes violence on some level. Not all, but some measure of it. The right wing made a critical error with the Nielsen interview. It's kind of hard to keep cloning their program secret when they have clones interview each other. And the only thing to do is try and differentiate the two, is to put a vest on one of them. Ryan from California, Allenberg was murdered by white nationalist terrorist group, The Order. That's just great. Sweet cow lick. Self-commissioned officer. Can you play the Varney? You have a good day, bro. Every time you get off the phone with Benjamin Dixon. I'm not convinced that Ted Cruz's father wasn't somehow involved. MAGA bomber. Braun's plan, still hoping to see an example for a path for perpetrators of sexual misconduct to take towards sincere behavior reform that allows them to access their old career. Louis just returning just to ignore it is disappointing indeed. Pornocopia, looks like Donald Trump's creepy kidnapper van was also a bomb-making factory. Maybe the right has finally found their pedophile ring. It was under the noses the entire time. Giz Garzley, Sam, how many times did Louis C.K. ask you to watch him touch himself, and how many times did you say, yeah, I want to see that, versus gross, let's go get a pizza? Lil Gleason, Charlie Kirk doesn't want money taken from him to pay for somebody else's school, but he was fine with taking other people's money to pay for his school when he almost went to West Point. Christo, hey Sam, non-political thought here. You may recall that we both have high school-bound children. I assume you're like me in the throes of the New York City school open house season. Yes, indeed. In fact, I saw a couple of folks last night. Curious how it's going for you. For Mila, my son has up to 5 visual arts auditions to look forward to in early December. It's going to be stressful beyond belief. Yes, she's got one this weekend or next weekend. It's hard. Secular Satanists, you should play some music from Public Domain in the breaks. A lot of good classical out there in the Public Domain.
No.
Valve, Sam, where does Kanye fall on the minstrel scale? New Human, last week The Guardian runs a big profile. Ann Coulter asking if we should listen to her about the left. This week, Coulter spreads the false flag narrative that bombs are a liberal tactic. All right, 2 more. JJ Cool. Hey, Sam, did you hear of any Jenks-Tucker debate? I did not. He plays right into Tucker's nonsense, seemingly a way to be cooperative, but to an audience, it appears to lend them credibility. Anyway, I think your style is far better. You say something born to do. Thank you. And the final I am of the day. The average human walking speed is 3.1 miles per hour. If there's 1,000 miles left to go and they all walk sun to sundown for 15 hours, then they would only get there by Election Day. Yes, it won't be till well after that. All right, folks, see you on Monday.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bar. But finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I get somewhere the choice was made, for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive between the 101 and the 5. Do you know how far the detour takes you? Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. The months drifted into years, while I shifted in and out of gear.